I've got to figure out the how to live the countdown stuff and everything is always just so much more exciting for people.
So even with a lot of the ones which I had a little countdown one running too, but even with the folks who do it every day, you still have, like, at least on the YouTube ones, where it starts off and everyone's like, "Are we started? Are we good?"
Yeah,
you do this multiple times a day. This is a horrible technical situation with a lot of these folks.
It's funny, isn't it? Like people keep coming along with new software and things that they're to fix these things, and they always end up basically just becoming more complicated than they should.
Don't worry, the next patch will make this even easier.
That's it. Yeah, not like it never does. All right, I'm going to go check and make sure that we are in fact streaming. As always, I've got autoplay on. Here we go. I don't see us live yet. I'm just going to do a little refresh and see if we can do that. We are live. Look at that. Fantastic. We are live. We are now muted. That's great. I'm going to pop out the chat. Pop it out. Here we go. So I can see what's going on a little bit. Although, frankly, these chats are always so intense. And I am so lucky, excited, thrilled.
The questions one gets from the audience always call into two types: really good and a little scary. That's just
yeah. We were just talking.
Sometimes both.
Isaac and I were just talking before about doing podcasts with people that we don't know, and in the past, for the most of them, as we said, most of them are fantastic.
Almost always.
But there's always one.
Yeah, there's always one, and at least in one case, it's my fault because I didn't do my research on the guy in advance.
That was me too.
Yeah. My favorite, though, was I didn't realize these folks had a shtick. I tend to listen to things on audio more than video, so I listened to their podcasts in advance. I didn't know they actually did, I said I was getting professional at the time because I didn't even show it on my face. I went back and watched the video afterwards, and there's one moment where I go, and their shtick was, as soon as they're done talking to me, they put it away and put up with two puppets. The viewers, we took two alien puppets. And if you watch it, you could just watch me blink for 1 second and go, let's continue. It was just, wow. I was not expecting that. It's like, do your research in advance.
Those are actor skills. Those are the actor skills right there.
It was good, too, but it's a unique experience being interviewed by a pair of puppets. So,
I should introduce you. First off, greetings, interwebs. It is David Hewlett here, and I've got my new best friend, Isaac Arthur here, who Agni has introduced me to. Since then, I have been just gobbling up the content content's a terrible word. The wonderful science fiction and science fact that you are putting together on your site. It's an honor to have Isaac Arthur here, and welcome to I'm with Genius.
Well, I'm really glad to be on. I've been a huge Stargate fan for years. I think I mentioned before, and I've known Agni for 8 or 9 years, maybe 7 or 8 at least.
Agni knows everybody. It's amazing.
One of the only fans of my show, because my show's been out for about a decade, though, and it's just one of those things where I grew up on sci-fi, so I like to use it as an exploration tool, and Stargate, Star Wars, Star Trek, anything with a star in front of it works for me. It's just like a show, so. But it's also one of the more realistic ones scientifically, as strange as that sounds. I know it was like, Star Trek's the really, technically accurate one. I was like, no, Star Trek's all techno-babble, so varies by franchise, I suppose.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, what really attracted me to your stuff was that it was the very definition, like the original definition of science fiction, where it's speculative fiction, where you are taking today's understanding of the world and physics and the quantum world or whatever technology we're working with, and you're projecting that forward, not in a narrative way, but in a sort of an intellectual, philosophical, and scientific way. And it's so much fun to listen to. I've got to say, though, I know why you have so many views. It's not just that they're amazing videos. It's that I want to go back. I keep going back and going over things again and going, oh, okay, I get it. On the 5th time round, I get it,
I was about to release these big compendium issues where we try to go back and review material that we've done like a dozen episodes on. And we had one that's a little over 3 hours long, and that one gets a ton of views because people to come back to watch it later on again.
Do you do them all in one go? Are you like sitting down and doing the full hour, 2 hours, whatever to go?
Oh, for the duration, yeah, usually. There's a couple exceptions, like those 3-hour compendium ones. My voice wouldn't last that long.
Yeah.
I'll hit the pause button and come back. That's one nice thing about voiceovers. You have to worry about the takes that will get in the way and messing with each other. Usually I sit down and record them in one shot, or I'll pause it for 5 minutes, come back and do the rest. Just depends on how I'm going that day and how long the episode is.
And how did you get started? Like, how does this happen? Maybe walk us through, the crooked path that took you to.
I guess my parents met when they were both physics majors in college, so I grew up really geeky, and they named me after Newton and Einstein. My middle name's Albert, as well as Isaac Asimov, as it turns out, too.
Wow.
So really
Wow.
Yeah,
they fully geeked you out. Yeah.
So I was sitting down with my mom after I graduated from college with my physics degree, and I'm 20 at the time, and all my friends were out drinking, and I couldn't go drink with them. I'm sitting down with her, and she says, "Yeah, well, I always thought you were going to go into physics." I was like, "What? How'd you know that?" I was like, "Well, we named you after Newton and Einstein." I called my older sister. I'm just like, "Yeah, you miss the most obvious stuff sometimes." Like,
That's the first time it had occurred to you?
it's your name. You don't think out too much. And then I went and joined the military not too long after that. I went to grad school for a while, left, went to the military, got out of the military, got into like local civics and governance, and I just missed doing all the geeky stuff. So I didn't want to be a writer because I do horrible dialogue. I do decent exposition, bad dialogue. Everyone exists to do exposition. But I was hanging out with some sci-fi authors telling me, here's some fun ideas you might be able to use in your stories, so it's not always the same, quarry somewhere or one world planet type thing. Some interesting, cool megastructures and ideas you could incorporate into the work.
Yeah.
And I finally just went and said, this would be faster if instead of repeating myself all the time, I just put them all in like a slideshow and upload it onto that YouTube thing.
Yeah.
And
Dump it on YouTube.
Well, yeah, so I put it on there, and like a few days later, I was like, wow, 10 people have watched this thing. I was like, that's neat. That saves me so much time. And then I got this note from YouTube saying, congratulations, you have a subscriber. I was like, well, what's a subscriber? So I like 4 months later, I ended up doing another episode on something completely different. I never meant for it to be any kind of show at all. Indeed, at the time, the channel had like pictures I'd taken of my raccoon or things like that on it. And then I was like, well, I'm not happy with the end of this episode. It needs more discussion. So I did another, then another, and a year later I was doing them weekly. So it's just kind of a spot at that point.
And you went, and when did you go full time with it?
I'd say, well, the first episode came out in September 2014. I think it became a full-time gig by early 2016, about March, I had started doing them weekly.
Really?
When it became a full-time job, I guess it would probably have been late 2016 is when I just realized this was not going to go away and started packing up when I was working on like, I like doing this more anyway.
Yeah, because it's amazing. Talk about creating a niche for yourself. It's fantastic.
If you can get people to pay you to do something you love, do that.
I know. I mean, like that's the acting thing for me, where I'm like, oh my god, I get to pretend to be like like a genius on television. Sure, why not? So what were you doing in the military? What was the specialty or?
I did initially. I originally worked for the Air Force as a civilian for a while back when I was 19, when I was in my senior year, and I gave me a taste for it. But I got glasses on and I can't fly. And I'm afraid of heights.
Right.
And so
yeah, good combo. I'd go straight for that, straight for the Air Force.
So I went and joined the Army too. And I guess in retrospect, they say 4 out of 5 active service members come from a family that was that too. My dad was in the Army. 2 of my 3 uncles were in the Army. Right. My cousins. And so it wasn't like most of us only did 1 term or so. I didn't make a career out of it. We weren't really career military, but it was one of those things the military did was join at some point. Army, Navy, whatever it was. So I went and done that. Afterwards, I went and joined the Army after grad school. And then when I was in there, I joined as artillery. But this was the middle of the Iraq War, so they really don't need a lot of active artillery when you're actually occupying a place. So they turned us all into infantry by the time of the surge.
Right.
And that was I'd say interesting work. And then I was also doing a lot of logistics. I was my unit's armor, fixing weapons, and training people how to use them too, because we had a lot of new technical gadgets on a lot of the equipment. All the extra stuff you can stick on a rifle that mostly just weighs it down. I hate to say.
Did you get all the manuals? You got into all the manuals?
Oh well, I had all the manuals. I was apparently the only one who actually read any of them. But I used to tuck the manuals into the gun's buttstocks, get an open 4-piece. To remind people they could actually just follow the instructions for how to maintain and fix the thing. It was much easier.
It is amazing how few people will read manuals. Yeah. I love manuals. I'm like, I have a weird, I'll read manuals for things I don't even own. Yeah.
And the military's got a manual for everything. They actually have one for how to make chocolate chip cookies. It's 33-some pages. And I found that one time. And it's surprising because it's like...
How are the cookies?
The things we found you have to store. It's the idea is if World War III starts up and you need a lot of, cookies or food, you need to be able to produce these in a way that you know is not going to rot. So it's the big instruction manual of what you can use.
Wow.
Is that what you use eggs? What kind of temperatures does it have to be at? And it makes sense. It's just like, wow, if you're ever looking for proof that bureaucracy exists, go look for the U.S. military. It's not in spades.
But it makes sense because I mean, you systemize everything, so it can always be done.
Yeah.
You know, you always know.
Right. So somebody who's never done it before was like, basically, what do you guys do? Well, we make donuts, and we're trying to start up a scratch shop to help out the war effort. And now they know exactly what they need to know. But that's the problem with bureaucracy. It always makes sense.
Right. Yeah. By adding more and more of it.
Yeah.
Usually
and the more you dip into the more like, well, that makes perfect sense. Like, there must be some way to cut this out. Like, no, let's do another patch on top of that.
Right.
Software.
Yeah. Like software design. Exactly. Yeah.
Let's put somebody in charge of this department for fixing that problem.
Has that, do you think, I mean, obviously physics had a huge impact on what you're doing, obviously, because, I mean, you speak to the science and the technology behind this stuff in a way that you rarely hear certainly in podcasts that I listen to, unless I'm in the really, really specific stuff. So you've got an innate understanding of the physics stuff. Is the military side of stuff? Do you? I mean, because you've touched on that as well.
Some of our most popular episodes were ones like space warfare.
Yeah.
We actually had a running gag for years called the First Rule of Warfare. And the idea was, this is a space warfare episode like 8 years back. When I was in the military, everything I got told by one of my sergeants, was like, the most important thing to know, or the first rule of warfare is, and it'd be something, something minor, some little platitude, whatever it was, like the best offense is good defense, and then the best defense is good offense, and remember, or you take care of your equipment, and little things like that.
Yeah.
But they're always the most important thing. No one ever said the second most important thing is. So whenever we discuss science fiction-based warfare, we have everything from like ground combat to huge naval engagements at sublight speeds. They say the first rule of warfare, whatever it is, we always put it that way. And the very first one is actually what Agni said earlier: is that if brute force isn't working, you're not using enough of it.
It's and I guess around the podcast, for want of a word, I mean, it's a YouTube channel. I don't know what one. I don't even know what to call these things. A show, yeah, show is a much better way of putting it. Around the show, I'm guessing you build up a sort of a lingo amongst your audience as well as you go. So.
It's one of those spots when you're writing episodes, you have to remind yourself that a lot of people have never seen this before, or they watch 5 or 6 episodes and want to be exposed to that. So you always have to make sure every episode is still accessible. But yeah, you get a lot of lingo in there, and so we put a lot of Easter eggs in the episodes too, a lot of geek cultural commentary. But we try to make sure they're in the episodes in a way that it's a pleasant surprise for the people who know it, and for everybody else, it's you're not really like, what? It's just there. They don't really have to think out too much. It just goes through and they get done the next piece. That's always tricky, though, when you're writing, because you want to spend time geeking out or talking about channel lore or things like that. It's a bad idea to spend too much on an episode on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's appreciated at times, but the one I love on the last one that I listened to about fusion was the high five, the chances of doing a high five while getting struck by lightning. I was like, oh, that's great. That really gives me a sense of the odds involved.
Because you have this thing that why doesn't fusion happen more, and why we always talk about deuterium? And it's the idea that the protons they have to meet up and touch, and we say, oh, well, 2 protons meet and fuse. It's like, well, that's not quite happens. They combine, they go like that. Yeah. And that happens reasonably often, but for them, it's not that they're fusing a proton to another proton. That's an unstable thing. It has to be at the exact moment that one of them decides to turn into a neutron. Right. So basically, it's the odds of getting struck by lightning while someone's also walking by and you get a high five, and say that's the improbable thing about fusion and Star Wars, and why it takes so many interactions. They're in this insanely fusion-rich environment for billions of years, and it's still less likely than not to have that happen one time.
But you're pretty confident. You're pretty pretty happy about this. I mean, it sounds to me like this is happening, right? Basically, we're going to be
fusion.
It
is the thing about fusion is that it's slow tech, but we have to. In people like why don't we have this right now? It's like, well, we might never have it technically because commercially viable, but in terms of technology, it's making great progress, and it's really easy for folks to forget. It's only been less than a century since we figured out what things like uranium were. We were very quick at turning like those first atom piles, the atomic pile. You don't hear about those anymore. We got that stuff running really quick as a power supply, and then we got the bomb really quick. It's okay. Well, we got fission, and we got fission bombs, and then with the opposite way around with fusion, we got the fusion bomb right away. So one's like, oh, we'll have fusion in 20 years tops.
Right.
So, well, that's great. That was a upbeat thing for the time. 20 years later, we didn't have it.
Yeah.
I said, well, why not? I said, well, this turned out to be a really difficult problem, as it turns out, because you're not trying to replicate the conditions inside a star. That's not enough. You have to go to like a supernova scale in order to actually get useful power out of it.
Because the stars are actually quite inefficient in their creation of
yeah.
energy. Yeah.
Because it takes them, I mean, the sun's going to live for billions of years on its fuel supply, because that's how long it's taking to burn it. It's really slow.
Right.
And it's just, if you were trying to run a 1 watt, 1 watt light bulb off the sun as a power to fuel kind of thing, you need something like I think what is it, 10,000 pounds of core fusion material to actually produce that 1 watt of sustainable power. Obviously, you pull that out, it's going to catch on fire because it's millions of degrees, but
Right.
That's going to cool down if you use it as active power for it to sustain. That's how much you need for that.
Right.
So instead of one tiny power supply that we'd have for 1 watt, you need something building sized. So we need to do a little bit better than that. Even though that balloon's going to run for billions of years, we want something that's going to do it much faster.
And contain it. I mean, it's one thing to blow things up. It's another thing to contain that explosion and use it for
and keep it that way. And we could do a fusion power tomorrow by just setting off a bunch of H bombs. It's actually affordable. It's just now you need a power plant that's very big. We could build that, but do you really want a centralized power supply that generates like 1 trillion watts of power at once? And say, well, maybe you could build one on the, by some of the biggest city areas. Maybe they'd have that power need, but then you're talking about actively building a H-bomb facility that's shooting them off a couple times a day near where you presumably want people to be at in high concentration.
yeah. Well, that was the nuclear issue, wasn't it? I mean, that was the fact that we're like traditional nuclear. That's just such a question though. Like, why the obsession with moving to fusion when we haven't even? I feel like we haven't really tapped fission properly. Right? I mean,
we haven't tapped fission as much as we could, and I'm going to tell people. I'm not sure I hold to it today, but I'm going to tell people about 10 years back that the really good power supply for the 21st century would be like a mix of fission and solar. As the solar got better and as the fission got better, because that gives you your good base load of nuclear, and then you can use the solar during your peak hours when it's sunny, or any surplus can be actually used to make hydrocarbons, carbon neutral hydrocarbons, and that's heavy power usage, but you kind of want that for a portable power supply. It's amazing. You don't do much better than like methane or gasoline for that. Batteries are just very unenergy dense, even lithium ones.
Yeah.
And so you get this carbon neutral supply of fossil fuels, as it were. They're doing that sort of thing. You use that for the same thing, you access nuclear power. But I'd say overall, nuclear is still got that fear factor on it, and solar has made some really good improvements. So we might end up skipping it entirely in favor of just doing solar and like molten salt power storage.
Right. The molten salt stuff is fascinating, isn't it?
Oh, it is, yeah.
Because they're talking about small units, like little neighborhood.
Right. Well, yeah, it could even potentially be household size. So it probably scales better than neighborhood scale. And it's like, is this what is it, like a volcano? Molten salt sounds dangerous. Like, well, it's hot, but you think of something like a water heater. It's a similar kind of concept there. It's just the way it's storing it. Liquids don't explode like steam engines do. It's not a pressure.
Right. Yeah.
That's so much easier to engineer around for failure, especially for joints and valves.
Right.
Because we basically generate everything using hot, running, steamy water, which is really the sizes on all these reactors. Everything does better at scale, but you have to do a lot of size on steam reactors to be efficient, just because everything needs to be so strong to hold that high pressure steam.
Yeah.
And it's so dangerous when it melts out. As strange as it sounds, one little drop,
and impossible to contain.
Yeah. And you have to stick to using water because you use some other substance that could be toxic. Water, at least you can breathe it if it cools down enough. You don't have to evacuate the whole area because you had a steam leak. Nuclear steam leak wouldn't be that big a deal. But I think molten salt's probably the way that's going to go, unless somebody makes really cool batteries. But you say, well, what's the technology look like? And the key thing to remember is that all of these technologies have been improving hugely. They're just keeping better and better. So some of them they say, what happened to this technology like wind? Wind got way better. It's just that solar got better faster than wind did. And same for like nuclear. Nuclear's made huge strides, but then this or that technology did even more. So if you're going to have a problem, if you're going to have a problem, being blessed with way too many power sources that are improving at once is the kind of problem that you want to have.
That's exactly.
That is the problem we have right now.
And the fact that we're like firing up old nuclear reactors to basically energize the AI revolution at the same time is
the worst mistake we made for our power supply stuff in the 90s was to start letting people get anti-nuclear and push kind of a narrative that we are low on supplies for that, which we are not even vaguely low on uranium. It's stupidly common. You can make more of it.
But wasn't the problem was more the waste product though, wasn't it? Wasn't that more of the people's issue?
It was, but it was never a very good one. The thing is, right now, almost all the waste is being stored underneath the older reactors. Tells you not very much of it. It's the short-term waste is problematic, and I'm not going to say there was no problem with it at all, but it's the large amounts of short-term stuff like a suit that's gotten itself slightly irradiated. You don't want to be sleeping next to that thing. Those things can take up space. But then, as long as you have a centralized place to dump them, or a reasonably centralized place, they're fine. I think the issue is that people don't, there's very much a NIMBY issue. You really don't want that thing in your backyard.
But maybe it'll get cheap enough to dump it in space or burn it off in the atmosphere or something.
Well, you wouldn't really want, if you put it off in the atmosphere, but breathe it in.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
The thing is, there's more uranium in most people's backyards than they tend to realize, and that stuff is actually, it's depleted uranium, but it's still radioactive. You have tons of it in just your typical backyard. And we have ambient radiation for a reason. But you have to pick some place and cover it over and let it sit there for a few decades. The thing about radioactive stuff is the more radioactive it is, the shorter it is radioactive. That's kind of the inherent nature of it.
Right.
And then we've gotten so much better at recycling things too. In a lot of cases, trying to pull the material out that you can reuse for like old rods. But it's a solvable problem. It's not really a huge one anyway. If you had to stick all of it into one single trash site that was walled over, you pick a desert and you need a space that's probably only a few acres across and about as deep. For like the entire world supply for years. It's not that huge of an issue in terms of volume.
So you think it's just an understanding then issue? I think it's just a matter that people just don't quite understand how it works.
A lot of it is that. I will be fair to say that if you want to transport that stuff, you got to move it by rail or by semi, and you're going to have somebody who's going to, and we had one of those just 60 miles south of me on East Palestine last year, and that was a pretty big deal. And that was not a bunch of radioactive waste. That was chemicals, but you're going to have spillage incidents. It's going to happen. But there is a lack of understanding on folks, too, is that they say, well, radiation, that's scary to me. As well, what type of radiation?
Yeah.
We have these non-descriptive names, so they more or less named them in order. You got the alpha particle, which is a helium atom. Those are very damaging when they hit things. It's like a bowling ball going through stuff and a molecular level. And then you've got beta radiation, which is electrons and positrons, and that's harmless. If you sit next to like a massive beta radiator right here and it won't get through your skin. Then you got gamma radiation, type 3 there as well, and that's mostly harmless too. That's your gamma rays, but that's also your radio waves, your light waves, etc. And so that breaks into ionizing radiation, which is those that are powerful enough to actually disrupt things. And then you got neutron radiation and a couple others that are newer to the game, so they just didn't give a number or a letter in the Greek alphabet. But neutron radiation is a bigger concern, and so we always worry about neutron emitters. But all of these things have their own particular way you shield against them, and it's mostly just about making people familiar with it. Because you say, well, this thing here is radioactive. You say, well, yeah, but that's kind of radioactive. We can wrap it like a little bit of paraffin or wax, and it's completely harmless. And even if it wasn't, it's mostly going to heat things up a bit. Whereas versus other ones that it might be horrifyingly deadly and dangerous, but because to people they don't really know what it is, and so we different types. They say, well, haven't done a good job educating on it too.
Right.
The problem is a lot of times people want to put it in techno speak. It's like don't put it in techno speak. Just show them the stuff.
Well, they use radioactive material in smoke detectors and stuff as well, right?
It's very useful. And again, it depends what you mean by radioactive. Radiation is anything that radiates out from something at a particle scale. So it's incredibly non-useful and descriptive. They're looking at like back in the day when they named this stuff, this substance seems to be emitting particles. Is basically what it was. It radiates particles, and it was doing things like exposing film in the laboratory. And so it just became the name for everything. The sun radiates at us, and a lot of that is horribly damaging radiation, in fact.
Yeah, it's the thing we forget when we get out into space, right? We no longer have that protective atmosphere. Yeah.
Space is very empty. It's empty of everything except stuff that wants you dead.
Dead,
so,
yeah. It's like the Australia of the universe. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it is amazing how empty space is until you think about all the stuff in there that, again, it's just lethal. The radiation is bad. And it's a manageable problem, too. As the problem is in space, you need shielding.
Right.
And shielding is heavy. And it gets more expensive the smaller your ship is, because you have this cube square law. So bigger is better with spaceships, we say on the show. Build these things huge. They get more expensive that way, but you basically, you're building in bulk. When you do space travel in bulk, radiation is not that big a deal anymore.
So you're just making the ships big enough that you've got space to protect yourself from whatever's coming.
Basically, your surface area is you make something twice as big. Well, if all I did was scale to be twice as long, it's actually got 2 squared or 4 times the surface area, and 2 cubed or 8 times the value. So if you make it 10 times bigger, it's got 100 times more shielding it needs, but it's got 1,000 times the cargo capacity or passenger space. So now you need a tenth the actual proportion of it, from a fuel or from a cost perspective that's in shielding to get the same job done. And so bigger just gets to be better. And then you also have the options where at that scale you can start kind of applying standardization, saying, well, we're going to have water tanks on the side of the ship that's pointed towards the sun, and the water is going to be our extra radiation shield. And that's going to be our water reserve, as we'll go fish at too, because we want fish for the 5-month journey to whatever rock we're going to eat, potentially, or watch, or both. And so you just try to build things at a bigger scale. Obviously, that makes it more expensive to do, but as we say right now, it costs us millions and millions of dollars to launch the equivalent of a cheap car into space.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's we need to start building in space. I'm assuming, right? Is that not? Yeah.
And we call that one in situ. And once you actually start building in space, it takes not even a tenth the fuel to get something off the moon that it does to get off of Earth, and a lot less to get it from some small asteroid nearby. And at that point in time, when what you want is just not something sophisticated, but just raw material to shield a ship, that's what you use. Use some rock, use some water. Clap on the side thing, use your extra fuel as shielding, and that comes really cheap because you don't have to do anything other than scoop it up and dump it on there. That's why we don't really worry about radiation shielding for like moon space, moon bases or Mars bases, except for like places you're trying to grow food or get sunlight, because you just throw regolith on top. The gravity's low, so
dig a hole. Yeah.
Or even inflate a habitat and throw dirt on top of it.
Oh, really?
The problem with it is you can do that on Mars because it's got dirt. But the moon is full of hyper sharp razor crystals of things, which we didn't know until the Apollo mission.
Not the best for balloons.
Yeah. And they say, well, why haven't we gotten back to the moon since? Like, well, there are many reasons. One of them was that once we got there, we realized how lucky we were that we didn't have all our equipment destroyed by this moon dust. And it's really an easy solved problem because it likes to stick to everything, too.
Really? So Mars would be easier from that perspective?
Mars would be easier because you just pile it on top. Yeah, I'd say the moon's easier because you got more weight, in terms of more mass per weight because it's lighter gravity there.
Right.
But yeah, if you find a small little crater somewhere, you throw a little pop-up tent in there and inflate it, and then you throw a rock and stone on top of it. You probably want to pick some kind of layer of material over top of that is really safe against pokiness, because you really don't want to get your air thing stabbed through. But if it does, something pokes through, you just go and put a piece of duct tape over it. It's not that complex. One of the things in sci-fi you see a lot is they get an air breach from some bullet going through the ship or something. It's like, oh no, now we're all going to die. It's like, no, it's only 1 atmosphere difference of air. It's not pumping out that fast. They're going to push you through. It's like, well, would it squeeze you through that hole? No, you don't. If you want to figure out what it's like to experience a vacuum hole on a spaceship, put your hand on top of a vacuum.
Right.
It's almost exactly the same pressure differential.
Really?
Yeah.
Hollywood loves making things more, you got to make it more exciting, though, right?
It looks cool. Watching some person get sucked through a sausage machine on the side of a ship.
Yeah. Eyes bulging and
Oh, I always remember that one from Total Recall.
Total Recall. Yeah. Didn't he explode? He exploded in that, didn't he? Wasn't there like a...
I think it's so. Yeah, their eyes are supposed to pop, but then I think they actually did get kicked out at the end, and they're having that happen, and the air all turns on because somehow they're able to produce air that fast with the alien devices, which is also not how that works. If you try to add water or air to a planet that fast, terraforming style, it'd be like dumping molten lava onto the people who are down there. It's because you got all the heat of interaction from the gravity that's like pouring on there.
How do you watch science fiction? It must drive you nuts. Or can you suspend your disbelief enough for it?
You have to suspend your disbelief.
Yeah.
And you take like a great classic, like we'll take Stargate instead. I was going to say Dune or Foundation.
All right, great. All right.
There's one big starting premise there. Aliens visited Earth a long time ago, and they made a Stargate that doesn't actually follow normal wormhole rules, just a portal. So okay, I'm good with that.
Right.
Everything else is good at that point. It's only you actually contradict science becomes a real issue, and like that's one of the problems they have with like Doctor Who a lot of times is it gets to be like, this has nothing at all to do with anything vaguely scientific. What are we doing here?
Yeah, it goes fantasy, doesn't it? Yeah.
And I mean, I like a lot of the sci fantasy stuff too, like Star Wars. Why would you ever fight battles with a laser or sword? Why not use a gun?
Yeah.
That's what they're for. But it's pretty fun. It's a fun show.
But it's definitely sci-fantasy rather than sci-fiction. Yeah.
And some of the best ones out there, like one of my favorites, Roger Zelazny's Lord of Light. It's a very, it's very much a sci-fantasy series, but it's very good as a speculative fiction.
Huh.
And so it doesn't always have to be hard science, but it's nice when it's nice when it does it right. And like a Michael Crichton books, he'll usually have some scientific focus in the book that he really dips into in details, and that's the one that gives that science fiction connection.
It does make a difference, doesn't it? I mean, there's something. It always feels a bit like it's the difference between the sort of the schlocky sci-fi Bulgaria films and the but even Interstellar and stuff runs into those issues as well, where you go like, what?
Interstellar's amazing for I hated that movie. The cinematography is great. A lot of the acting's good too. But 5 minutes in, they're like, "Our planet's being overrun by some nitrogen-eating plant or whatever it was, and we're all going to die off in a desert. Let's take the whole human population, put them into modern spaceships, and blast them away to another planet to solve the problem." So I've got a better idea. Let's take an area, bulldoze it over, build a glass dome over it, and then pump in air that's stale into it like a big garden dome thing, and grow food in that.
Yeah, it's a little easier. Yeah.
It's a lot easier.
Yeah, it's
you
fun.
have to do that on the other planet anyway. So it's a lot easier here where the industry's at and the people.
And that's always my complaint about going to Mars. Is it's like, I get it from an exploration standpoint. I don't get it as it doesn't make sense beyond that to me, because I just go like, I feel like we've got some problems we should solve here that would be a lot easier than trying to create a whole new.
You'll figure some of those out in the process too. But one mistake people make all the time is like, well, we need to find a new planet before we destroy this one. You could glass this planet with nukes all day long, blow the entire atmosphere and water off it, and still have a better time re-terraforming Earth with the remaining mutants living in bunkers, right? And you would try to terraform.
That's a cheery thought. Yeah,
it is not easy. You do not discard worlds and go build a new one.
Yeah,
it's like saying, well, I'm gonna grow a garden. I'm gonna trash every day. I'm gonna move to a new house with a new garden and grow it first.
Right.
Not how that works.
Well, it's like the Spock. It's the Spock thing, right? We terraform with the special the nature bomb or whatever it was.
That's great. I don't know how you would possibly make that. We actually have an episode where we step through the heat that would be involved in doing something like that with nanotechnology. And if you try to do even that on less than a 30-year basis, little nanobots doing it, you would boil that planet into molten lava.
Just because the amount of
energy trying to do the little individual steps. Yeah.
Wow.
It's too much too fast. Try to put water on a planet. We did that one for Mars a lot. We say, well, if you're bringing these in as comets, all of which are hitting at like 5, 6, 7, 8 kilometers a second, which means they have more kinetic energy than rocket fuel when they hit.
Right.
You are raining on a planet. I think we worked out that it would rain every day, in like full-blown Seattle-style rain every day for like 10,000 years of nonstop flash floods too, because they hold your place.
Yeah.
And to add on to it, the water would be boiling.
Right.
And say, okay, but you can do this. I'm all in favor of doing this, but this is not something, terraforming is inherently destructive.
Right.
You don't slowly change it. You're not spray painting a landscape with green paint.
Right.
This is a planet-changing process. And we mean that very literally.
So it's going to be small. It's going to be small in little habitation, little, like tents, basically.
You could do it. You could tour a whole planet around. You could do the Ward House approach, where you build a dome, build another dome, touch it, build another until you got the whole planet over.
Right.
That works too, right? That's called para-terraforming. Or you could build space habitats that have a regular day. It's 24 hours from the get-go, regular air pressure, regular lighting, and regular gravity, because you can do that through spin rotation.
Right, right.
And so we tend to say that might be an easier approach than doing a planet. As to whether or not we'll terraform Mars, I think we probably, because you got to try it somewhere, right? So there's a decent chance that we might actually do that there. But I think that as a whole, Mars is the easiest place to set up a human colony.
Really, and like as you're saying, even better than the moon at this point.
Yeah, it's better because we know it's probably got enough gravity to at least be adaptable. Although we can't say too much about that yet. It's got water. It's got enough light. It's not a it's like, I want to go ahead and colonize the Sahara Desert or Antarctica, but you can do it, right? We know we can do it. Other places are a little bit more iffy. Whether or not we should do it is another story. But the other part is, just because you've gone and colonized some place that is, Greenland, basically, does not mean that this is going to be a great place to have trade or economies.
Right, right.
And if you try to set up a successful colony, you kind of want one that is attractive to immigration and trade, not one that is
terrifying.
This horrible environment where there's barely time to raise kids and half them die while you're trying to grow them may not be the future place we usually show in sci-fi, where it's like Earth versus Mars.
That's where all the billionaires want to go, though. I mean,
and I'm glad they do, because it takes a lot of funding and a lot of motivation to get that in there. But at the same time, I'm a moon first type of person. So set that base up on the moon, get that operational, and when we see how people do living under like microgravity on the moon, or building things from the moon, which is only 2 seconds away by communication, not several minutes, then I'd be okay with sending humans there to Mars, because right now, if we go to Mars, there's a very good chance that what you're not buying is a it's $100 billion trip or something like that. And they say, well, it's great, you get them back, you got to get them there and bring them back, so you have their victory parade. And if you don't get them back, if you're not at least 90% certain you're going to get these folks back, it's not a big parade, it's a $100 billion funeral cortege.
Yeah.
And that's not going to do any favors to the space industry.
Yeah. It's funny, though, because, I mean, it's a very different approach to exploration than we used to have, isn't it? I mean, we used to hop in boats and sail off, and you didn't know whether you were coming back or not. That was part of the... Whereas now, there's definitely, obviously, like a much more value to human life on that. But I suppose at some point we are going to have to take those plunges that aren't necessary. You don't know you're coming back. I mean,
I would say we do live in a more risk-averse civilization, which is not necessarily a bad thing. When you're in a high infrastructure or high industry kind of culture, you need to be a little bit risk-averse because everything is really expensive to replace or repair. But also, traditionally, exploration was being done by the people getting kicked out of the tribe. You were leaving in wonder y'all because they like, all right, y'all, you're an 18-year-old boy, you're in the way, go away. And I'll go explore things. That's what I'm going to do. That's kind of like pre-programming. And if they didn't come back, you're like, oh, well, that's sad. We miss him, but not that much. They do not. It's a brutal civilization.
Yeah.
And they get in their boat and they see what new piece of Pacific Island they can find, or they wander off in the wilderness, and they don't come back. And they come back, look what I found. Oh, yay. You only find out they survived and it's good.
Right. Yeah, if it's bad, you never hear them again. Right, I see.
Right now, it's like, hey, we're going to dump $1 billion into this project and show these heroes on the screen every day and talk about how awesome they are. And also, thanks now to the live streaming webcams, you'll be right there with them to see them every day while they suffocate to death because we ran out of air and there's no way to refuel them.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, well, we got a snippet of that, didn't we? With the with the 13, whole, what was that?
Apollo 13.
Apollo 13, but also more recently with the Titanic stuff, where you go you got there's these people, it's the space tourism type thing, only obviously deep sea, but that it's...
You think, that's horrible. You got the whole world focused on the idea of that, and people are forced to think about that death, which is, probably no worse than being eaten by a wolf or breaking your leg somewhere in the wilderness, but still. Yeah,
I still think eaten's worse. The idea of being eaten is just something that doesn't... it's the
shark. To be, I always think of it as a posthumous state, so it's like, well, something's come by and snapped your neck and ate you, which is... I'm okay with that.
That's fine. Yeah.
How much disposal at that point in time.
If I get a choice, Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose, I mean,
No, I eat people alive.
right. Yeah, that's not, it's the bear thing. So when the bear comes and slowly peels the bits back, that's not that, not good at all. I always found that amazing when I went to Australia. Everyone was always like, oh, you live in Canada? Aren't you just scared all the time? I'm like, what are you talking about? You've got bears. Like, you got bears. You got every freaking spider, plant, whatever. They all want to kill people there.
These things live in deserts. I suppose that's because, again, I'm like just on the south side of Lake Erie here, so
Right.
similar climate. It's pretty mild. You get occasional bear or coyote here too.
Yeah.
But, we didn't want to try to steal our honey last year.
Oh, really? You got bees? You got bees?
Oh yeah, my wife keeps bees in the backyard. I sometimes join her in that effort. But I used to be the one who hoards the big hives up while she pulls stuff out, and having like 50 bees land on your hand and trying to find ways to poke you through them is less fun. So I built her new ones that didn't require that effort on my part.
I am fascinated by it. Like it's one of those things I've wanted to do for ages. We didn't do it at first. We talked ourselves out of it because we thought, oh, I got the kid. You don't want the kid running around, bunch of, we got tiny.
Well, we had the kids go out in their own little suits. They love it.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, you won't be sending them out to do any exploring in the near future then, so you're not going to.
No, they can go into the backyard and work with the bees while other people are there. Although, the kids were initially afraid of the bees because they had to walk by them to one of the areas in the backyard.
Yeah.
And I told my youngest son, Gio, is well, if you get stung by a bee, I'll give you a piece of candy. And this is a couple years back, and so he comes back like a week later. He's like, Dad, I got stung by a bee, stung. I give him a piece of candy. He comes back and like 2 days later, stung.
He's just putting his hand in.
And we're like, about like 10 pieces of candy later. I was like, I'm wising up to this. But he has no problem up his mom with the bees. So he's got his own little suit. He's so relaxed around them. So.
And are you doing you doing the whole honey thing, wax, all sorts of what are you getting out of it?
Honey mostly, yeah. So we will harvest honeycomb occasionally, but we usually go for the pre-made ones where where they're filling them in as opposed to trying to have them grow the long honeycomb themselves out of it.
Right.
And extracting that honey, we have a mechanical one, man.
Oh yeah, you got the spinner?
Yeah, and I'm the one who has to do that. Like,
yeah.
It's a fun process, but it is certainly it's a good workout. We'll say that when you have to do that.
It feels like science fiction to me. Like it feels, I don't know what it is about it. There's something about the idea of harness. I mean, I know we've got cows, we've got sheep, we got goat, we got all the, I get it. For some reason, when it comes to harvesting insect product, it feels like science fiction to me.
It's one of the best pieces of science fiction I think of. It's Gregory Benford's Galactic Central Saga. He has an example where humans have died off and they left behind a bunch of their genetically engineered items. One's this field of corn that gets itself harvested by insects. The ants will come by, they'll take the corn off and go drop the little kernels in one bin, and then they'll take the rest of it back to their own hive. And these have been programmed to do that. Say, well, that's probably not mechanically the most energetic way, but that would be like you could engineer something like that. That would be incredibly effective.
Well, that is amazing. I mean, if you think about it, the idea that you could basically hack the instinctive habits of a creature to your advantage. I mean, we do it with dogs, I suppose.
We do that with natural selection, and it's kind of inefficient. You look like your modern cow or sheep; they are freaks. They are
total freaks.
Worse than a poodle. But if you assume that humans get a little better with actual scientific knowledge and practice, which we have been, then you do start being able to do options like that, and you'll need to do that for a lot of times. You're trying to terraform to a smaller ecosystem, like a domed habitat on Mars or one of the big space habitats we discussed, like an O'Neill cylinder. You either have something mechanical and artificial doing the step, or you have something organic doing the step. And either way, that's a very artificial system you're creating, so you can make a case either way. But if I want to see a lot of forest and nature life in my space habitat or my dome, then I don't want to have a little robot do anything. I'm going to take that extra effort to have the squirrels I already have there that I want to see get programmed to do something like pick up the trash. So they're well suited to it, and they just use a little wiring chip to change it, and they know they can run over. And so, a cigarette butt or whatever. I'm going to run over to the dispensary and trade it in for one of these food pellets instead. And then you could get weird things like, "Welcome to this habitat. By the way, the squirrels can mutate a little bit. They will try to pick your pockets for garbage." Right.
Yeah. Because someone's gonna use them for evil, for sure.
Yeah. That's like, look, a gum wrapper. Throw that gum out. Let's give me that wrapper. I'm going to throw that in the
But
food
it's
dispensary.
but it's fascinating. If you think about it, though, it's not that far from reality to some extent. If you think about, like dolphins doing bomb detection or
They
mine
like hanging out
minesweep.
with us too, so
Yeah.
they're awesome, and we can use them for that, and they like doing it.
Hmm.
And I mean, obviously, it is so easy to turn that into something truly evil, but it's
Oh,
so
God,
easy
yeah.
to anything that. It's knowledge is power.
Hmm.
What you use that power for is iffy. And again, technology also opens up doors. Some of those doors, you choose which ones you want to step through. It's not always going to be the same answer for everybody. Some people will have a different setup. You might have a place where people are like, hey, let's terraform this planet so we can have gills on that can swim around like fish. And another place would say, you know what, let's not do that. Let's build a raft city instead, and we can just put scuba diving equipment on and we'll swim. And you might have, a colony that broke in half when they get there, because you got one side that says, let's live on this water planet with the raft cities, and they say, no, I want to go live in the sea. And so you end up with two divergent alien species. They're both from Earth originally. They'll share that planet.
Or fighting horribly is more likely.
Well,
probably.
sharing it be, relative to it, right?
Yeah.
There's always conflict with humanity, and I don't try to say the future's always going to be peaceful, but I think as a whole, if you got smart, intelligent, experienced creatures, they're all going to try to avoid escalation too much.
You would think, wouldn't you? You would.
Escalation, even history tends to happen mostly by accident because one side's convinced it's going to win really easy. So
Right.
basically, it's a dumb call. But with these escalation steps in nature, even with things like lobsters are actually good examples of this, where every step is like one more, like, I'm going to puff my chest up, bigger. All right, now I'm going to take a poke at you.
Right.
I'm gonna take, okay, I won. All right, they're all leaving. And they have to keep going up and up and up to the point where they're actually willing to do bodily harm to each other, because they know that even a fairly one-sided fight, there's a lot of risk of damage.
It's
And
better
a
to
lot of
avoid
those-
that.
Yeah. And I think that we will tend to see that it's not like you're not going to have conflict in the future. I think it will tend to escalate a lot less often, which is good, because escalation in a high-tech civilization can get bad quick.
Right. So would you say are you a tech optimist, or maybe it's a tech realist almost? I feel like.
I get called a techno-optimist a lot, and I'll even self-describe that way sometimes, but I was thinking of myself as kind of a pragmatic cynic, as it were. I think of technology as very disruptive, but as a whole beneficial, and I just tend to think that as a whole, if this thing lets you have more options, then you can solve problems better with it. And if you can solve problems better, you probably tend to have less of them.
Right.
Or at least more rarefied ones. We come up with new problems every day. Society's got tons of them. We're talking about post-scarcity civilizations where they don't have to worry about food anymore. We're already pretty close to that.
And look at the scarcity. That's the frustration, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've got we've always had a surplus of air, for instance, or in many places water. But just because you get one scarcity doesn't mean you suddenly don't have any. We have been losing jobs to technology for centuries now. We keep replacing them. It's not because we're making make work. We keep coming with new things to do. And while we can think of some of those as luxuries, a lot of them not so much luxuries when we think about them anymore. It's not that you can't go without that, but if your basic standard is survival, and that just means food and water, then you're demoting yourself as an organism down to basically a digestive tract with some stuff on it. If you actually think of yourself as an organism with varied goals and desires and needs and wants, then you need to start finding ways to fill those more complicated ones, which, again, your basic physiological ones, most of us have them solved these days. And we're only going to get better at those. Then you get the ones that are more like, safety, comfort, a sense of well-being, not being afraid that you're going to die from cancer in 10 minutes. So we find new things to do with all these folks who are unemployed by this one technology. That might end one day, but again, it's that same thing I said earlier about the energy technologies. If your problem is that you have so much stuff and so many options, you're just blessed with endless options, that's the kind of problem that you want to have. It's still a problem, it is, but it's a much better problem than the alternatives.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like we've been through so many of these in our lifetime. Like, there's been so many complete revolutions, like complete change, like even just in our industry, going from film to video and digital.
It's become like the base state is disruption.
Yeah. There was an MIT. Was it MIT? It was one of the journals. I can't remember. It was saying that they were tracking job loss since image generation was created, since basically image generation hit the market for general use, and they saw a 25% drop in those jobs. And and there's this thing where you go like, well, but I don't want AI doing art. I want to do the art. Like that's the fun part for me is the art. But at the same time I use it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I'd rather it did my laundry for me. Like you know what I mean?
Like, the thing is, everyone's got tasks that we all have our chores that we did growing up. Like I had to do dishes as a kid. So
Oh God, I hated dishes. Hated
Mostly
it.
I do is get a dishwasher. That's what it's for.
But then I hated loading the dishwasher.
Yeah.
Or unloading the
So I get
dishwasher.
kids
Sorry.
do that too. So I get the kids do that one. That's their
Right.
job. And maybe 5 or 6 years, when they'll order and don't want to do anymore, I'll use one of those robots that Elon Musk is getting ready to throw out.
Oh yeah.
And it's not the idea that you don't want to have tasks. People need tasks. The last thing we want to do is unemploy, and even in a society where you've got stuff,
You got Wallies.
stuff that poison. Right?
Yeah, you get the Wally humans. Yeah.
You need to have things for people to do, and they like having things to do. But we like to be able to pick which ones we do. There are ones we don't want to do, and that varies by the individual. So you can make an economy based off of people doing things they want to do that other people don't, or where you have ones with some which they're just automated because it's just so much cheaper or nobody wants to do it. But with things like AI art, a lot of artists use them as the kind of like the same way they do digital art. I don't want to draw the same thing 5,000 times in a flip book. They used to do that for animation.
Yeah.
That went away. You can do that digitally with little changes now. A lot of people use the AI art as I don't have to draw 5 million different backgrounds. Generate me this background, generate me this basic image, and I'll alter it to what I'm putting in there. And I use them in the show a lot because I don't want to have to try to find an artist to describe how to create a really bizarre alien landscape with X, Y, and Z on there.
And I can't afford to. Like the reality is, for me, I would never hire someone to do artwork for thumbnails and stuff, anyways, because I just didn't have the. If I had the money, I would in a second. But now, the AI allows.
It will be better quality a lot of times because that artist has the artist can come up with something that actually looks more beautiful in a lot of cases. I've had a lot of cases where somebody sent me an art that I asked them to do, like give me X, and they didn't. And they gave me something that was actually even cooler. Great.
Yeah.
A lot of times it wasn't what I wanted at all. You're like, oh, I guess that will work.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, I don't feel bad saying, please redo that again.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
relatively
Do you say
cheap.
please? Are you actually polite to AI?
I am actually very polite.
Yeah,
to
me
AI.
too. Me too. I just figure hedge your bets. You know what I mean? Like
There is, I suppose, probably an aspect of that, but it's one of those things where I think if you get yourself in the habit of being rude to machines, that will eventually translate onto being rude to people too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's just a conversational thing. When I talk to it, I will thank it too a lot. Of
Yeah.
times.
I don't know. I get such glee out of thanking it for some reason. I don't know why. I do. It's like
It's good behavior. It's polite. It's polite behavior. It's like stopping at a stop sign when there's nobody around all around you because it's there's nobody there, but you still stop at the stop sign. So
It would never occur to me not to. That's what's so funny is like I feel like I'm so. I suppose some people would see that as a weakness, I suppose, but I see it as a I mean I think it's just in case.
And it's a good one because there's always that 1 in 1,000 chance that you just weren't paying attention. And that was the time somebody went.
Yeah.
And if you're driving thousands and thousands of times, those 1 in 1,000 chances happen. But so my wife was on the phone and she didn't realize that she was talking to customer support that was an AI, and she was being very polite. I was very happy when she was done with it too, but she was very polite when she was going through. I was like, "Oh, it's nice of you to be polite to a machine." And she said, "What do you mean?" It's like that was an AI. It's got an American accent. It's asking you very straightforward questions and it's rephrasing statements to you in a way that those was of no like that's an LLM you'll have talked to. But it's like, oh, they can do customer support, and I was like, yes. And be glad for that because customer service is the suckiest job you could ever have.
The worst job, the absolute worst. Yeah.
And I imagine for those audience members who haven't done this, don't. Unless you want to build a thicker skin, then go do it for like a week or two, and then find a new job. And
People just come in angry. They just come.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't do tech
Something
support,
is
but
wrong. Fix it for me, and they're going to yell at you because that happens. Not everybody. I try to be polite to customer support myself, but it's a sucky job.
and also if you can remove the stupid stuff, if you can remove the have you tried turning it off and on, the reboots, the this, I mean, the obvious, is it plugged in, etc. If you can remove all of that nonsense that you've had to say a million times, like the reason why you started your YouTube channel because you didn't want to answer the same question 50 times, get those out of the way, then we can use our brains for fun things, like trying to figure out what the more complex problems are, or whatever. You know.
And so you don't get rid of all the humans, right? You get rid of 90% of them in that customer service wing. So you get the point with AIs that's just there for they know when it's time to send it up to the next person, and they got two people to choose from: the one who's really good at anger management with people, and the one who's got the really high technical knowledge, right? And you can pay both those people more because you only have to pay two people as opposed to 20 or 30, and two, they now have a very skilled job. It's not just basically take it on a chin from somebody for 10 minutes while trying to get them to hit the power button. It's somebody who's there to basically deal with diffusing someone who's going nuclear, or someone who's there to be like, all right, let's step through the really weird options now because this is going to go to the tech team. When you're done with me, the next step is going to be 6 guys in a room treating it like it was, I can't think of the call line now, skunk walks and
Right.
the whole team over to go and dump all the stuff out on the ship and say, fix this ship from what's here. That becomes the next step of tech support at that point in time.
Which is the fun stuff. Like that's the where you
the fun stuff.
the detective work.
And people will trust the AI a little bit more, and they also, you don't really waste time yelling at a machine much. You know, it's like we've all thumped a vending machine, but you don't really do that much because this isn't going to do anything. Plus, there's probably a camera too. So
my wife and I, my wife argues with Google Maps a lot, which I have to separate them every so often. And I said, like, don't make me choose because we're driving.
My wife hates to use Google Maps too. It's like, well, I gave up on that early. I've lost the ability to navigate properly.
Yeah, me too. I've completely succumbed to it because I just go like, I don't. You know what? If it gets something wrong, great. I go around a circle one extra time. I don't need to. Whatever. Like I know that it's going to figure out, and it has a better perspective on my travels than I will ever have.
If you really get lost, you still know what to do next, which is look for north or look for a human being and ask them.
Ask your wife. That's usually what I do.
On the phone, yeah. And we used to have these wonderful county maps and all the gas stations. You get these little red county maps that you just grab one of those, and you know when to go to a strange area. You look through that at the gas station. You took it with you, and the gas attendants usually knew the directions around too.
Yeah. I had the Thomas Guide in L.A. It was the big book of the Thomas Guide in Los Angeles, and you had the certain pages would fall out after a while because they were the ones you were always in certain areas and stuff. Yeah.
You could ask the local gas station attendant or convenience store, where is the blah, and they could tell you with good instructions. It was kind of got to be part of the job. Same as back in the day, to check people's oil and stuff was part of that job. But it isn't anymore, and that's not a good or a bad thing. It's just a shift. And this is the same way as a lot of this technology. It is never 100% good. There's always be something lost. So, like, we've lost people in the arts before. I do remember 20 years back when people complained about all these cheap digital artists doing this stuff on computers, replacing things. Yeah,
Photoshop. People hated Photoshop. People hated desktop publishing when it first came out.
And it wasn't perfect either. I mean, you think about all the practical effects going away in sci-fi favor CGI.
Terrible CG when you look at some of that stuff now.
Oh yeah, I love the old show Babylon 5 from the 90s. When I go back and watch that sometime on Blu-ray, it's like, good God, you could see the models.
Yeah.
It's still a good show, but it does obviously it doesn't wear as well as a lot of practical effects.
Oh my God, the Doctor Who's, like going back and watching Doctor Who from the 80s and 90s. Oh my, Blake Seven. Yeah. You get the little spaceships.
You can see it looks like you can see the wire on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Because it adds a little bit of flavor to it too. Because like it can mess with suspension of disbelief, but
and I think it's a bit like seeing a play to me. It's like you go like, obviously these things are not happening on stage. It's symbolic of what and I think that can, if it's done well enough, I feel like you can get away with murder on that stuff.
When the lights go down on the set and you hear people running around putting stuff up there, and somebody always bumps into something, it's like, yeah, that's part of it. So you have a nice conversation in the background to distract yourself in front of this background noise to mess things up behind there and crash into things and move the set around. It's part of the event.
I go like for me, it's whenever I watch someone slam a door. And you just check to see what else is moving. And it always takes me out of a movie now. Whenever I see someone slam a door, because you go like, either they're in a real house and it's not a problem, or most of the time they're on set and you see all the pictures like move or so their spaceship rattles as they move, that kind of stuff. So.
In like a real house, for instance, if you have all the windows shut, doors close a lot harder because there's a pressure difference. They close quietly. You open up a window and it will shut like a bang.
Which happened in an old house that we had, that which of course most people in Vancouver would have assumed was haunted because of that. We figured out it was exactly that. It was an air pressure change.
And it's those little tiny things like that obviously for sets that that you have to deal with and be practical about that requires some really serious professionals. And then you get one technology changes, suddenly renders that irrelevant completely. Typesetting before you had like Lizzie, what you get many different fonts on there and be able to print them all like inkjet. Those were real jobs, took a real skill, and they're gone. They're just gone.
Well, photography. I mean, to some extent, photography. There used to be you could earn a living as a photographer. I don't know that, other than maybe I suppose. Yeah, I don't even know how. I'm not sure how that industry's holding up now.
I know one locally. He used to be. He teaches classes on it, and my wife's really into photography too, so she's enjoyed them. She had her photographs taken for her.
Like classic photography, like she's using like film and chemicals. And stuff?
No. It's digital. It's all DSLR
like
cameras.
DSLR, right, yeah.
And the guy who was teaching, he was the White House photographer for Vice President Pence.
Wow.
And so he has a big enough reputation. He actually do some teaching, get commissions.
Yeah.
A lot of the photographers, it's hard to get work in that job.
Well, and look, and your photos aren't. I mean, look, we're seeing this to film and TV to some extent as well, where a film is not worth what it used to be worth anymore, because of course, as soon as it's digital, there's a digital copy out there. It's like a photograph. It's basically gone. Yeah.
It's the film and the thing. Nobody develops their own stuff anymore. That's not true. A lot of people do it as a hobby.
There's the kids. There's a bunch of the younger kids who I've run into, like at film festivals and stuff, have got a renewed interest in 35 millimeter and old 16 mil film stuff. And I'm always like, why? Like, I don't. It's like records. I don't understand why records came back. I'm like, it just seems like an added nuisance.
I had been opposed to records making a comeback until one time I was listening to a song on CD and the record right next to it. And it was like, this really was better quality on the record. But that deal has passed because the digital quality has gone up a lot still since then. But because you see, there's only so much range your ear has, and we can digitize that level.
I'm partially deaf, so everything sounds like an AM radio to me anyway. So it doesn't make no sense. To me, it's just the nuisance of having to get up and move the damn needle around and bump things, and
it's got that. There was a certain kind of quality to it, but there's all these vintage things. We all have a few vintage things we're really into. And you get this
I got a cabinet of Magic the Gathering and Pokemon cards, for God's sake.
I wish I could find my old cards.
Dig them up.
I don't know where my Pokemon cards are. My son has them.
The funny thing now is that the Pokemon cards are worth more than the Magic cards are now.
Really?
Yeah.
I wish I could find my old ones for that and for BattleTech. I used to have the BattleTech CGI, which I was very fond of in the 90s.
Yeah.
A lot of those. I got an old shelf there full of like D&D books.
Me too. Yeah. That's yeah.
I don't need them anymore. I got the digital copy, but they're there, and I can touch them.
There's something, and I think that it's funny. Because it almost goes back to the AI thing to some extent. I feel like we crave those unique experiences now. The idea of having an original this or an original that, I think, has become more valuable because of the digital, the what is it? The fungible quality of everything.
Yeah. It's hard to put in a kind of a context, but texture is the best I can think for it. Is there's something about it. I don't mean necessarily the physical texture of it, but there is some extra layer that this has this way that isn't necessary. It isn't necessary, but for a lot of people, adds to it or brings it back to them to be more experiential. And so we do this with a lot of anachronistic technologies. Is that
you did choose a collection of particularly difficult words in a row there.
Especially, you got a lot of R's in them. But,
a lot of R's again. Yeah.
When I was doing my speech therapy originally, trying to get around my speech impediment, they had me doing like Peter Piper, Peter Pecker, Pickle Peppers, and so I got to be pretty good at that one after a while.
Yeah.
But there are certain sentences that are nearly impossible, and that if I'm any one of those on a script, I'll just remove it and replace it at some point. If you botch it 5 times in a row, find some other way to say that sentence. But I don't know if you ever had that one, like something on in the screenplay where you just had to like, can we please just change
all the time. There's a bunch of things. I struggle with nuclear every time. Every single time I struggle with that. Yeah. But it's interesting. Okay, sorry. I mean, and obviously if you don't want to discuss this, then don't. But you chose to do a voice-over YouTube channel, and you have, you have a speech impediment. What would you call it? Is it?
It's a speech impediment. It's called eroticism or eroticism, where you can't pronounce the letter R. And
right.
I can pronounce it now. But when I started the show, I thought it was way better than it used to be. And everyone would tell me, oh, yeah, you're much easier to understand than you used to be. But you go back and listen to ones from like 9 years ago, oh, wow, it's really nice. It's like listening to Barry Kripke, apparently. It's the first time I heard of that character, actually. But from the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
About 2 years ago, I was taking my youngest son Gio in to have him check to see if he might have a speech impediment or something like that.
Right.
And he said, no, he's fine. He's fine. And reminded me, well, I've been meaning to get back to my speech therapy because I'd stopped doing it for a while when I got married. After 3 or 4 years of speech therapy, it was probably about as bad as I was going to get. And then I saw a new person who specialized in R's. I said, open your mouth and say, you got a tongue tie. You're never going to be able to pronounce the letter R correctly. It's like, well, it should be obvious. You were doing this for years. You seem like you work hard at things when you do them. You've got a tongue tie. So he ended up giving me some therapy, physical therapy for that advance, then that surgery. And I didn't magically learn to pronounce the letter R after that, but they could still be able to actually physically pronounce it.
But you could physically pronounce it after not being able to before.
And I never thought of it as being too bad of a thing, because of course people don't tend to tell you to your face as much. They're much less kind on the internet. That they couldn't understand me.
Of course they are.
So, yeah. But I always put out a transcript of my videos. I put the actual transcript, just uploaded as subtitles for every episode. And we put a little Elmo Fudd thing saying, if you're having problems understanding me, hit the captions button. And I guess a lot of people really got used to it. We had a big audience as a result of it, so it was possible. But if you look at Wikipedia, it's lists of like famous people with speech impediments, and because of alphabetical order, I'm right up there at the top of the thing. And it's not a very long list, so it is definitely a hindrance. And I would say if you've got a speech impediment, and I'll consider your career as a voiceover actor or anything like that, you should probably consider getting some therapy for it anyway, because it's not going to make things easier, but it can be done. And
well, there's training required. Well, I mean, for certainly the professional voiceover people, they'll do voice training anyways. I mean,
got to focus on it. But for me, I was never planning to make a channel out of it, so I was figuring I'd just hire a narrator. And my audience told me, no, don't do that. I said, well, okay, if you don't want me to. In retrospect, that you don't when you have a channel or show that's based around a personality, don't mess with that.
Yeah.
Don't hire somebody else or something like that. But to me, it's just like I never cared. I wrote this stuff. I don't care who was saying it out loud. So I was going to hire a voice actor, and I could probably have done that early on. It wouldn't be a big deal. But and obviously, I said at this point, well, if I'm going to keep doing it, I'm going to go get me some speech therapy. Yeah. And 8 years later, or 7 years later, whatever it is, I can pronounce the letter R, so long as I'm paying attention.
Right. No, it's amazing. I just think that's. I mean, look, it's as it should be, right? I mean, you want people with different voices, with different backgrounds, different. I mean, that's the advantage of this stuff, is that you're going to have, is you're going to attract an audience of people who just like you for being you, right? I mean, that's what's so cool about it. Time,
though, you have to be realistic. It's like if what you're doing is trying to teach people, educate them, inform them on a topic, they have to be able to understand you. And so people say, well, it's not that big a deal. So for me, it was, because my goal was actually to get this info into their head.
It's communication, yeah.
They can't understand me, so you have to make that effort into it too. And I would just say anything you're doing that's in the public eye, this way where people listen to you, put the effort into to learn to do it better. That's and then again, that's just part of the core of what it is. You have a lot of folks these days, they do well as an influencer or something like that, and then they don't really try to improve their work too much in a formal fashion. And if it works for them, that's fine. You don't have to, but I'd say it's always good. Put that extra effort in. Do whatever you're doing.
I was always torn on that from the acting standpoint, because I was always like, I didn't want to take acting classes for fear that I might mess something up. Like, I don't know what I would mess up, but I mean, maybe that's just an arrogance as a kid, maybe. But
could be one of those things where you like, if your style is something, and you go in there and you get somebody who's like, well, you need to be a Shakespearean actor. I was like, I'd like to do those. That is not going to work well with certain characters, certain behaviors.
Well, and I've seen very naturalistic actors go into acting classes and come out and sound like a theater student, and I'm like, what did he do?
Very different now, and if it works for them, but it might not.
And again, I think a lot of it's confidence as well, right? I mean, it's that getting that, we should go to some questions. I didn't realize we've literally been talking for over an hour, and in the blink of an eye. So we should go to Agna and find out what she's got in the way of questions for us. Because I'm sure
I just rattle on. So
no, this is amazing. And this is the whole point of this. This is entirely selfish in that I get to chat with the people that I want to chat with, and this has just been an absolute joy. I'm so jealous of what you do, because I feel like, you get to dream for a living. I mean, it's kind of a wonderful thing, and I could see why there's such an appeal to it.
I love what did.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, just keep it like that. It's great. All right. Is there any way to increase Isaac's microphone? Oh no, really?
Really, is the volume one low?
That was a long chat. Let me see if I can do that.
For the last time hour, I got bumped.
There you go. I can bump mine too. A little low.
Okay. Because I'm recovering from pneumonia. I hate to say in the back.
Are you really?
I've been talking probably a little bit lower. Yeah, I caught it right after election day, so it was.
Oh God. Were you knocking on doors?
No. I run the elections for my area of Ohio, so
oh wow,
it's a bit of a stressful time running around doing all the prep work on that. So.
How did it go? Was it smooth?
Very smoothly, thank God.
Good.
We've had many good ones in a row. Ohio has been a swing state for a long time, so we've had a lot of time to iron out all the technical issues, and because we're staying over shorter on that stuff, and so we have really got it down to an art, and it's still a very stressful art to perform now.
I'm sure. Well, there's there's such this weird unknown to it now as well, which is just a shame. But hopefully that will change.
Technical side of actually conducting elections is a completely nonpartisan thing, obviously, but it's a lot more complicated than people tend to think. It's so much beyond just throwing a ballot into the machine. I'm going to knock California though for just the constant effort not to actually learn how to do it properly. A lot of the other states, it's not that hard to count ballots.
Yeah,
you had prep work in advance. I think they're still doing it now.
California's still counting.
Yeah,
that's where I vote out of. So you vote from the last state you lived in as an American. I'm in Canada now.
I mean, every state has a delay in ballots coming in that have ones like postmarked from out of country. You count the other ones in the meantime and release the numbers.
Yeah, why California doesn't do that?
No, I don't know what they're doing. It seems like they do it differently in each location.
It's California. It's like if you shake the world, all the loose bits end up in California. That's what
the other states are at 99% but they're just waiting until the certification day line, which is tomorrow. It's tomorrow for me. I have to go do that tomorrow morning. So
your work is cut out for you.
Yeah.
All right. I've got questions. Martin Taki Martin. We'll go with Martin. On the topic of fusion, do you suppose the fusion, as shown in The Expanse, is something that can exist in the next 100 years? Relatively small reactor using a tiny fusion pellet as a fuel. What do you think?
I think if it can be done, yes. This is one of the things about technology is if it's possible, it's probably going to get figured out in the next century or so. We tend to think there's always another box inside a box, but a lot of these are technical issues where we know what has to happen to make that possible. If the materials or the science that you do it, it would. A really good superconductor with a really good magnetic shielding could let you push things up to that kind of level of pressure where you had that instantaneous fusion. And that really wouldn't be too scale relevant. You could do that very small potentially. Probably not like fit inside your suitcase type small, but potentially small enough to fit inside something building size like the engines they have in those ships. At the same time, I think that fusion's always one of those things that's going to be a lot better at scale. So you're looking at really big reactors, not really tiny ones. But if you can make a small one,
just because of the expense and the magnet, all the magnets.
There's a lot of things are a depth thing. Like if you need this much shielding, that's not going to change. No matter whether you're building this big, this big or this big, it still needs that much shielding.
Right.
And that's because that's just how much stuff has to go through in order to get absorbed, and that kind of thing would be limited. But if you can throttle the stuff magnetically into some really tiny choke point, like we imagined with U-shaped ramjets back in the day, that could be very small. I'm not really too optimistic about making it happen, but if you can, I would say there's a good odds it would happen this century or two.
And what's holding it back? You think is it the technology, the magnetic technology to or
we
what is it?
We don't have anything that's a good magnetic shield. We have something called mu metal, which is like a nickel or something alloy, but it's the best magnetic shield we have, but it's still not a real shield. Magnetic fields are really hard to shield against. If you got anything that was a true magnetic shield, you could just stop it like a wall. Same for superconductors. If you get a real warm temperature superconductor, that would also make it much easier to generate these magnetic fields cheaper and more sustainably. But again, you get those two things together, and that's probably going to fix that problem, let you do micro-size fusion. Same for if you got some material that can reflect gamma rays. You really can't reflect things that you say, well, you could just make some material that would do that. But light is reflected by using materials that are about the same size as those light particles. If you look like microwave shielding, it looks like chicken wire because of how big microwaves are. The wavelength of light involved is kind of relevant. Gamma rays are the size of atomic nuclei, so it's kind of hard to make something that is going to reflect them. We don't think we can. If you could get something that could do that, though, bam, instantaneously you've got some really cool fusion technology.
There's not like an active material of some sort. There's not sort of like some kind of a.
Certain plasmas can let you reflect like X-rays at a very, very shallow angle. But we kind of want something that you can just bounce right off the surface. Because if you're trying to build a containment reactor, you're not going to get only shallow angles. You got things bounce off. And there's always room for changes on that. I don't like to just rule things out. For we know someone might come with some way to put together something besides up and down quarks, like strange quarks, into some material that's like, hey, look, I reflect gamma rays, and just like that, it's fixed.
Right.
It's not one of those things that's like, it seems to be impossible the way that FTL tends to be.
Right. Yeah, FTL is always the stumbling point, isn't it? You've sort of got to jump over FTL to get to whatever science fiction you want to get to, really, isn't it?
Yeah. That's one of the biggest things we do on the show is talk about how you can still settle space without having FTL, because I tend to be really pessimistic about ever actually getting that to work.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, but we also don't seem happy as a society to think to have to move that slowly, right? I mean,
well, we wouldn't want to. It's a different civilization at that point, but I think something people tend not to realize is just how huge solar systems are. So how many planets in the solar system? People say, well, 8, or maybe 9 with Pluto. I was like, no, it's about 1 million. They're small. They're small planets. They're minor planets. Any of those could be turned into civilizations in their own right that were as big as most modern nations. So you get some empire of 1 million star systems, space opera style, packed into one solar system. It's still want to have other solar systems.
Yeah.
You've got a much bigger space to explore.
I always find that the longer a science fiction show continues, the shorter the distances are between. People always end up like, we started, it took a while to get somewhere, and then it's like, whatever.
It's this galaxy today, and tomorrow we're going to be back.
There you go. That's the beauty of Stargates, right? I mean,
they did things with Stargate universe where it's like this is 1 billion light years, and it took us 1 million years to get there. But nothing to it. So.
The Stargate thing was always funny to me because the whole wormhole thing was constantly being debated and then debunked and debated and debunked throughout Atlantis. I remember.
We have that. That is that. There's many different types of portals or wormholes you could do, but there's one that's allowed under general relativity specifically, that the Einstein-Rosen bridge.
Right. Yeah.
And various versions of that. Like one that Kip Thorne does is a minor variation. It's not quite the same thing, but that's not the only ones that are allowed under a scientific theory. It's just those ones look like they might. Maybe not be completely impossible. Right. So all the focus lands on them. You could actually.
Is that the antimatter? You got to get antimatter into it to keep it open, or
negative matter? It's the negative matter one, and say, well, we got antimatter, but we can't. We don't have any negative matter. That's a problem. We never found so much of a single speck of this stuff. But you can do it. You can keep it open with the negative matter, so you could actually traverse it. And that's the big problem. You can make a wormhole. It's just passing through this thing, which is a black hole.
Right.
And so you're going to have to go through a black hole and survive the trip. And then you could go to a different location. And we're not sure it really would or not, and we don't know what to empty out in this universe. But if you could do that, and that's where the negative matter comes in, we don't have any. And if you say, well, we got antimatter, so we have negative matter. I say, well, what exactly is negative? If we have negative and positive charge, we just name them that. That's just the flip sides of something. You don't necessarily have like, what's a negative dollar bill? What's a negative gallon of water? So well, we have these on paper. Great, you can do it on math. Hand me a negative gallon of water.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay. Sorry. I can hand you the sheet of paper I've written the math on, but
the math works perfectly.
Yeah. We just got to figure out the whole negative matter thing. Yeah, it was amazing. I remember being on set, and I would one day I'd come in, I'd be like, it's okay, guys, it all makes sense. And then like a week later, I'd be like, it's all right, debunked, forget it.
Got a new one. It doesn't make sense.
Got a new one. It doesn't make sense.
All right. Stuff, but there are other theories for portals besides the classic wormhole. I think we focus a little bit too much on that one for sci-fi.
Is it because that's just the easiest one to get people to get their heads around, or what do you think?
We never really portray it that way, but don't bother explaining what it is. Just say it's a portal from point A to point B. It has these functions. Right. It's open for 38 minutes. Leave it there.
And did we ever on Stargate? Did we ever clarify? Did we ever say what it was? Was there ever
sometimes because they mentioned they bring up the Einstein-Rosen thing a little bit here.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard that or maybe even said that.
Yeah, and it's fine to bring it up because it was the most viable theory. It's just again, it's not solidified. And usually when we're talking about building one of these, we're talking about something that's got the mass of several planets, not separate stars. So you don't really put that in inside your facility and flip it on. Yeah.
Generally, yeah.
Always on.
Yeah, there's a few issues here and there. There you go. Lance, KPG Gaming saying magic cards equals negative money. That's
it's a good way to, that could be, if that's a valid point, you can spend on other things, but still, you can't really build out of that, unfortunately.
Exactly. All right, Cassiu says, what do you think about the virtual power plants that they want to make with a lot of solar-powered batteries in Germany? Virtual power plants want to make a lot of solar-powered batteries.
I don't want to call it virtual power plants before, but I guess the idea there is you've got a lot of them connected, maybe. But Germany is not necessarily the best place in the world to be assuming solar power, but that's kind of a sticking point. Is I do not know why Germany decommissioned so many of its nuclear power plants. That was again.
Was just reactionary?
More details of that. There may be deeper bits that I just haven't paid attention to, so I could say, bad on you because I don't know what the details were, but nuclear would have worked really well in Germany, in my semi-informed opinion, and they probably should have doubled down on that more. But,
I'm amazed that California isn't covered in solar panels. It's one of those things I couldn't. It just makes it doesn't make any sense to me that isn't just everywhere.
You still need a way to store the stuff to use it during bad weather and during nighttime. And batteries are a pain. It really is expensive to have them. But we go for something like molten salts. But there's options. You can store heat and
the mechanical. I love the mechanical batteries where you sort of lift a weight up and it slowly.
Oh yeah. You
slowly
comes up in there and let it drop back down.
It's just kind of fun.
So you pump water up in the top of some big reservoir, and then you when the sun's running, you pump the water up there. And then at night time you let it back down. It's like flow generator.
Yeah.
You do that with pumping air into things or pumping liquid into things. It's compressed air storage, which is, again, you don't really want to compress gases if you can avoid it, to be honest. Or you can do, like we do with air compressors, or you do something with just liquid storage. All you're doing is just lifting it up. You get like 90% efficiency on an engine, but you have to build some huge reservoir up down. And so you could do that at an angle where you just build it inland, on top of something that's a few hundred meters up and trade it back.
And it's got to be fairly sizable too, if it's going to last you for you don't know how long.
And weather phases, And then it becomes a big reservoir, and then you have to set that land aside. You could put a solar panel over top of that, I suppose, too, but it is just one of those things where there's a cost investment, and the question is, how does that work out cost-wise, and how does it scale?
And I think we always want one solution. Yeah. We always want the one magic pill that's going to make all the difference. And the reality is, more as we know, it's always a multitude of different things.
It will always be a difference. I mean, you might come up with someone's like, well, look, we have this brand new matter to energy converter. This is just, you pump pills in here and it turns into energy. You get that, then you have a one type solution. Otherwise, be ready for a spectrum of options that are going to apply to someplace better.
And you may need a combination. You need a combination. You got battery, you got wind, you've got maybe your own personal nuclear. Who knows?
Somebody will make one little improvement to this piece of technology and be, oh well, that makes much more economical now. So this place that wasn't using before does, or this place that was using a little bit of it used a lot more, and then something else that was doing really well doesn't sell as much now because of that. And I remind people with energy is, again, we have lots of ways to produce it. We really do. Trying to produce it economically is the key, and the question isn't, is it going to how much energy do you need for it to be economical? You will always use electricity, even if it's just to run light bulbs, if the stuff is even $1 a kilowatt hour. But when you want to use it to do everything, then you want really cheap, and you need the cheapest version. So we're not going to run out of energy. That's never been on the cards. That's just people talking. Trying to run out of an energy type that you can actually economically produce sustainably, that's a challenge, but it's one we can absolutely do. It's just a challenge. So
and the cost of getting off things like the fossil fuels that we know are getting more expensive.
And you could have examples where somebody comes out and they produce a really good, cheap solar panel that lets you produce, produce fossil fuels and non-fossil fuels, carbon neutral ones like methane. So you keep using them because they're very energy dense storage. Or someone creates a battery that is even more energy dense than hydrogen fuel or hydrogen fuel cells for that matter, and they use that instead. And I just tell you, don't try to plan your energy grid around 30 years from now. Buildings don't last that long. Roads have to be replaced every 10 years. Plazas every 10 years. Build to what you can do right now, or what you think you're going to be able to do for sure next year. And then when you get those upgrades, change them.
What have you got? What are you running? Where you are?
Nuclear.
It is nuclear, like us too. Same.
Yeah. We got a beautiful power plant. It's got the worst safety record of anyone in
It's got the worst? Really?
Allegedly. It's got a lot of little minor ones. It's a perinuclear power plant nearby me. And I say that with a little tongue-in-cheek because it's never been a serious issue in the area. It's always been a safe place. My uncle's helped build the thing, pipe fitters. So it's been running well. We had, it's been running well past its lifetime, too, which is not a good thing.
I know. They always see that proudly. Like, yeah, it's gone 20 years longer than we expected. You're like, oh.
Well, for the engineers, it's a good success. Like with Voyager, it's like, we did overdrive. I was like, you absolutely did. I'm sorry you had to.
Yeah.
We did build some more of those. But
yeah, Voyager's amazing, extraordinary. What that
It'd be nice if we had 20 more probes out there.
Yeah. We will. I think we will, right? I mean, I get the sense now that the cost has come down to such an extent that I feel like we can't.
It's enough that we pretty much had to give up on the dark skies policy, is because we got so many constellations of satellites getting ready to get shot up into space these days. So we're going to have to start doing our astronomy in deep space because
of Musk.
You can't tell it when we don't. Yeah, well, not
the
just Musk,
freaking. Well, it's funny, but that's the one I noticed the most when I first went up to the cottage. We rent a cottage every year.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, my God, I got a string of,
But because that's in place now, China's going to do it. India's talked about doing them.
Yeah.
And they're going to want to do more of them. And so you're going to end up with thousands and thousands of satellites up there. And of course, things I always tell people on the show, like we're going to have power collectors up there, or we're going to have big space habitats. And you say, wow, what's that going to look like? Visible. You'll be able to see it from the planet. Even you put like an O'Neill cylinder could be built to the actual North Moon L4, L5 point. And you would still be able to see it with the naked eye at night.
Right.
And not like it's a dot.
Well, didn't Musk start painting his black or something? There was he trying to get
so they're non-reflective, and you can do that. But
it's still blocking.
We just finished up a big report. We in this case being the National Space Society,
Of which you are the president.
Which I am the president.
Yes, indeed.
Being president, and we commissioned a power satellite study. After a very bad report on NASA that was not done well, I'll just knock NASA about that one, to show that what the viability looked like of various systems, which was a lot better than the report had it. And people say, well, what if you put those in orbit? Say, well, if you put them in geostationary, as the plan is, they're still pretty bright because we're talking about something the size of a football field that's covered in glass. It's shiny. We tilt that away and we blacken everything else up so it's not that bad on light pollution. Let's say you hang that up in space. Say, well, that could be bad. And say, what we haven't seen yet, and we will see, is billboards in space.
Yeah, that's the...
Because there's a dwell time. They're going to be overhead for a couple minutes at a time. They rotate around a 90-minute window. Yeah. That's a billboard. It doesn't have to last long. It's some inflatable billboard somebody shoots up there, and it doesn't have to last long. And it just says Pepsi.
Yeah.
It just floats overhead. It'd be like skywriting.
They're going to do it. I mean, it's like we've commercialized everything else,
And so I predicted that happening about 10 years back. I didn't know when it was going to happen. It hasn't happened yet, but I think it'll be in our lifetime. Someone's going to launch a billboard up there. Probably Musk or Bezos. It's just Amazon.
Or maybe it's like
because people are going to remember the first one. You're always going to remember that first one.
You just put a blank one up there and just fire a laser show at it of some sort.
You could do that one too, but you'd have to only for those because it's going to go overhead and fairly.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right. Right, what am I saying? Of course.
You could still do that though by having one that's just a projector a little bit away from it that could change the whole time. Or given the cost involved, you could launch a gigantic TV screen up there.
Actually, that's true because once it's up there, it's just the cost of getting the stuff up there. Oh my God, let's not give people ideas.
It unfold itself. It's a thin one. It's just.
That's all we need.
Big LED screen, and so now you've got this big thing up there that's close. It just says Pepsi. When there's hundreds up there, they won't have that much effect if we start shooting them down. But
you're right, though. It's going to be Tesla or something. It's going to be like a Tesla ad or a...
And you'll remember it forever. It's like skywriting. Nobody pays attention to skywriting that's done on a daily basis, but when it's done frequently on the force, it's like, wow, look at that.
Yeah. The drones, I love the drone stuff where they've got the swarms of drones that will... again, that's like, it's like a hologram.
It's a novelty value, so it's cool. It's new. But
we have another question for you. This is from Nixie. What vision of the future did you have as a kid that you really wish to come true but hasn't yet?
Oh, let's see. That hasn't come true yet.
That's great that you have to think about it, though. It means a lot of them have.
A lot of them have come true, and a lot of them are further off. So what I actually like as a kid, And I was a huge Star Trek fan back then because Star Trek Next Generation had just come out. And I grew up on that, the original series.
TNG.
And Tom
With
Baker.
Tom Baker, yeah, me too. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And
I was Pertwee to Tom Baker, so I was watching John, and then
the little yellow car. What was that thing?
Bessie.
Bessie.
Yeah. Or is it Betty? Bessie or Betty? I can't remember, one of the two.
Bessie or Betty. And then it is Venusian karate that he practiced too.
Is that what it was? Oh my God!
You don't quote me on that. I'm sure.
Yeah. He had that because he would do that. He would do that move, wouldn't he? That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah,
it was fun one. And the character playing the master back then, I can't remember what his name was. He was very good too.
Oh yeah, I loved him.
Over the top, like not quite Shatnery levels of carpentry on that.
It was and Baker was not exactly subtle either.
Oh yeah, no.
He was the Nick Cave of sci-fi at the time. I mean, like he was doing some odd stuff too. So.
I forgot what the name of the Sixth Doctor is right now. He was worse about it than him though. But
was it? He was. What, Baker was the fourth. Mm-hmm. Then it was Peter Davidson. And then it was
Colin Baker.
Was it Colin Baker? Oh yeah, okay, right. I sort of lost touch after I started Peter Davidson a little bit, and then I was like, I probably aged out of it a bit at that point.
There's even reruns from back then too. So I think I was probably 7 or 8 when I was really watching the regularity, and that would have been 1988, 89. So that's also when TNG came out, and you're watching that one. In my time, I was watching that one on the rabbit ears. We had always got a ABC, NBC, CBS, the PBS channel you get in there, and then Channel 10 London out of wherever London is. And
right.
So you would come across sometimes if the airwave was being kind. And
right.
Some beats on that too.
Like London, Ontario?
London, Ontario, yeah.
Oh wow! So you were getting. So did you get? Did you get the our? And that's what Doctor Who was on.
It was on PBS a lot too, but I think it would sometimes come through on that too. Don't quote me on that.
Because PBS was for me. It was PBS. It was TVO actually for us, but it was what I loved about it was that they had a sci-fi writer or a scientist on afterwards to fill up that 25 minutes or whatever that the.
That'd be a good choice. Yeah, not too much of that in Doctor Who, I'm afraid.
But although they did a great job because they would talk about like. I'm trying to think of an example. Like, would be they would talk about the idea of a race of humans that we were actually in a larval stage, and that there was another, an ascension stage type thing.
That's a really popular one too. Yeah, that ascension idea.
Conceptually,
going somewhere was like this is our early form, and we're going to grow into something. And I'm sure that's true. Though
beautiful butterflies.
Yeah. Oh God. I was thinking the scene from one of the Alien films. The guy says that. Was it Brad? He's this actor who's in a lot of things. He always comes over. Brad Dourif.
Brad Dourif, yeah.
Wormtongue, and he's a great actor, by the way.
Yeah,
he's very good at playing TV roles. He says there are beautiful butterflies in one of the Alien films. I can't remember which of the various sequels it was, but I always it's stuck in my head when someone says that.
I always think of that. What is it? It's the Bug's Life for me.
Oh, that's
the kids.
The
kids will do that.
He's busy getting eaten by one of the aliens.
Exactly. Yeah. Slightly different. So technologies that haven't come to fruition yet, that you're like, God damn it, why not?
Well, I never held out too much hope for replicators, like Star Trek style ones.
Well, we got 3D printers though. I mean,
3D printers, yeah, but you don't print out a cup of tea or gray though.
Yeah, that's true.
Here's your Sunday. I do remember they had little cards there in the original TOS you could stick in there. Like a food wafer would spit it out.
Right.
Not quite sure what the science on that one was. But
yeah.
Who cares? I'd say that was one of the ones I wouldn't have minded having, but I would say the big one I always wanted was fast light travel.
Yeah.
I'm a notorious skeptic about it. I don't think we're going to find that, but I think I was probably in my senior year in physics, where I was like, this is just, when you get enough of the math and the real physics in the background, you're like, I don't know how this could actually work. And it's one of those ones where it's not like there's no pathway to it. Some things we just don't have a pathway to, like perpetual motion machine, right? There's no pathway to it, but there's nothing like the laws of thermodynamics don't have to always hold on something like that. You got energy to make the Big Bang, you got dark energy comes somewhere. There could be an infinite power supply, but there's no pathway. With FTL, it's almost the reverse. Like the door is slammed shut in the face.
Right at the beginning, yeah.
So I don't know how we get around that. And you have cheats that you could do, maybe like a hyperspace where you just go up to some congruent other space and come back down, or I think we'd have better chances of getting fast light travel to other universes than we would ever in here.
Right. In a way, the punching through is right. More possible than the.
If there's a connection, then there's some way to send information. You can send stuff there, and But if you got to travel on, I'd say things that involve higher dimensional access are a lot more plausible to me than ones that even like warp drives. I know how those works is people tend to think that's going to let you contract huge amounts of space. I don't think they realize the sheer amount of energy that's going to be involved in stuff like that.
Right. You basically got to be carrying a sun around with you with a
And you that sun would be your ship at that point in time.
Yeah.
And still, because you have to drag all that with you. And the problem is it goes all the way up to infinity. It keeps going once you get to that too. So it's the sun's not a lot for those cases. But same for like wormholes, you need solar masses worth of matter to do that.
Right.
And even like the Visser case where you can get down to say a few hundred kilograms, in theory, it's one of those ones where, well, maybe we could figure out a way to put one particle through. And so if I could put one particle through, then I could put a person. But it's, one particle at a time. How long would it take you to teleport a person, for instance, one particle at a time? You say, that's not too bad. There's like, 10 to the 27 particles. That's a loose number inside a human body. That sounds like it's my right zone, maybe 10 to 28, something like that. So, okay, well, how many seconds is that? Oh, it's 10 to 7 some seconds in a year, so 10 to 28 would be, just 10 to 21 years. It's a billion trillion years.
Yeah, it's still not exactly faster.
Kind of work out quite there. They say, well, I get one particle there fast. You can use that for studying information, at least.
Well, that's the funny thing is, like, if we could become, I mean, some of the other stuff I love it when you talk about sort of the end of the universe stuff, where you're talking about civilizations at the end of the universe. The idea of these massive computational systems that are left behind. I feel like in a way the information is the way to go. Again, not faster than light, but at least at speeds that we would be able to potentially experience.
It does become that issue as we say, well, a post-biological civilization. I try to discourage people from thinking that it's just AI or something like that. Say, every piece of information is printed on some kind of substrate. If I print Shakespeare, he's on a substrate of paper or dead lambs in the parchment or whatever it would have been. I tend to feel like the one on paper and the one on parchment are probably about the same. I could also put Shakespeare on the substrate of a T-shirt, or I could put Shakespeare onto a giant field of grass. I could just literally mow Shakespeare onto a huge field somewhere.
Right.
And it's still Shakespeare. I would argue that substrate does matter. What it's on, it probably does have an effect, but it's not the key thing there. So whether you got your human mind is on the substrate of squishy neurons or computer chips or carved into space-time itself directly somehow, which there's pathways potentially to that too. These are things that are allowing you to keep your mind going after an era of stars. And would you do that? Well, individually, you might not. We might not. We probably wouldn't be around in a trillion years for this to be a problem for us personally. It's not going to pop up overnight, but there will be some people who said yes. And they're still going to be around. And the people who said no are not. So, that might be fine. If you lived a trillion years, say, I'm done. I don't need to keep going after this. I don't need to see the black hole era. They might just say, I'm done. I'm not interested in making that transfer. But some people presumably would if they could. And so you end up with a civilization at that point in time.
That is just the people who don't want to give up. Well, not give up is the wrong word, but who just are still curious.
The survival-oriented people tend to keep surviving. Yeah.
Right.
You think about that for if you fix something like immortality, a biological immortality, because over say immortality, but so you don't age, or so that you are more or less immune to accident disease, over a long enough period of time, you have a population stop because you can't keep growing indefinitely at that point. You start biasing towards the people who are very good at continuing to live, whether it's they're very good at surviving against violence or just they're very good at staying upbeat and keep on going as opposed to saying, I'm done, I'm going to call it quits.
Yeah, wallowing in self-pity alone. Right, exactly. Yeah.
So you tend to have a civilization made of whoever could keep doing that. That's just going to be the nature because it's going to start selecting towards that.
Well, and the assumption with evolution as well is that it's always something we're going towards better, but it's got nothing to do with better, isn't it? It's just about what it's literally about what works, right? It's not that it's not that the species we see today are better than they were before. It's just that they're specific to their.
It's not quite fair to say that natural selection and evolution is a tautology in the sense that survival of the fittest is defined by what most fitly survives, because there's a hereditary aspect of evolution that kicks in there. But it is always a mistake to approach evolution from the idea of it trying to create something better.
Right.
As a sad reality, as you ask most people give me an example of evolution, and they'll almost always give you an example of intelligent design on accident.
Right.
Like,
Right.
oh, yeah, it's like the car or the computer. I was like, no, that would be a textbook example of intelligent design.
Yeah. Yeah.
Looking for random oops. And the reality is, if you ask like most biologists, you say, do you think it'd be very likely for intelligent life to arise on other planets? You ask a physicist, oh yeah, fine, the energy's there. You ask a biologist, like, oh no, it could happen, obviously, but it's not nearly as, this is not some inevitable ladder like you're thinking it is.
Yeah.
And so, we think of evolution as improvement.
Yeah.
It isn't. It's better adapting to an individual environment. And if you have a really static environment, like let's say we made a artificial planet that had all the computer controls and AI that was making sure it always stayed exactly like it was supposed to be. No changes to the local climate or anything like that. You would I'd say rapidly, but in an evolutionary context, begin to merge towards these hyper-specialized organisms that lived in that one really narrow niche and did it amazingly well.
Right. Like a virus.
Yeah, well, exactly like a virus. Yeah, they would stop getting rid of anything that wasn't necessary too with time because they'd be competing to be most efficient to that one thing that they did. And we're not talking like they were hyper well designed to live in a desert. We're talking about a role instead. This creature was hyper well designed to jump at creatures as they walk past a tree. That's what it does. That's all it does. It has nothing it does besides that.
A squirrel who picks up garbage. That's going to survive because no one wants to get rid of them.
Right. So it's something hyper specialized.
Right.
And hyper specialized doesn't include a brain.
Huh.
Brains are expensive.
Yeah.
You want to get rid of as much brain as possible. And that doesn't mean you want to have reactions of brains, but what good is a brain like ours when it's mostly so you can ruminate over weird stuff? That's the power of our brain at an early level. We didn't use fire for even like making clay pots until we had for like 1 million years. We used it for cooking food, and so our intestines presumably got shorter. We used it for sharpening sticks, and we used it to stay warm by. But beyond that, what did we use that huge brain for? It wasn't inventing stuff. It took us forever to do that. It was for looking at scenarios and saying, well, in nature, there's ways to figure out if something is dangerous. I can find out the hard way, and my surviving descendants will do that naturally by trial and error. Or I can watch other people make mistakes. They're like, oh, it's a bad idea to run up to that mammoth and poke it.
Right.
We saw Bill do that, so we know better than do that.
Yeah. Don't
That's
be a
not
Bill.
Survival planet either, right? You can teach people not to do that. Or you can think your way through in advance. We ruminate a lot, right? We think about what do we just do, and we dissect it to see what we shouldn't do, and we think about what we should do in the future. That's the real power of our brain. It's really handy for what we're doing now with technology.
And has kept us alive.
Useless. That is utterly useless in an environment that's specialized to that degree, though. If you live in a static environment where nothing new ever pops up, what the heck would you need that kind of brain for?
Jeez, that's such a weird thought. But wow.
It's one of those ones where you try to think about what would cause alien life to get intelligent, and you need a certain amount of stability to grow organisms, obviously, but not too much. Not too much.
It almost feeds into that, what is it? Just what was the film with the insects? It's a battle. Starship Troopers. The idea of like just a killing machine, basically. Just the idea that it doesn't think, it just attacks, and of course it survives because nothing survives it, basically.
Yeah, and that movie is so unlike the book, but they're both. I like the film.
Yeah.
The book. They're not in any way related.
Yeah,
but
completely different.
It's a specialized killing machine.
Yeah.
And Pierre Watts, he's a marine biologist. He wrote this great book called Blind Sight that just kind of examines this idea that conscious mind might be kind of a bit of an unnecessary and non-productive thing to have, even for technological civilizations. And if you go back and read it nowadays, you'll recognize instantly him talking about things like ChatGPT. At the time, they talk about it as a Chinese room because that's the early thought experiment. And it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but for everybody nowadays, you can read that very easily. Be like, oh my God, that's exactly what that's doing. Because at the time was this unbelievable idea that you could be talking to a machine and not realize it.
Right.
A stupid machine, too.
Yeah.
Not data, not a small computer. A dumb, ChatGPT bot. And the question then becomes, what do you actually need that brains for in a high-tech civilization? Do you need to have that much brains? Because most
if it's just predictive. If it's just predictive spitting out stuff, then what do you need the...
And of course for us, we need it because we want it. We're going to keep it. We're not going to get rid of our brains. But you do get that concern that you might have civilizations that, for the most part, don't see any advantage to continue to be intelligent. And so that's your idiocracy scenarios where civilizations get so perfect they dumb down.
Man, that film comes up all the time because it's so horribly prescient in a way. I mean,
and I can debate the like. I don't think that would happen with us. And my two bases for that is one, intelligence is genetic to some degree, but it mostly isn't. If you find most really smart people, they do have full-blooded siblings or cousins who are more or less the same to them, who are not teaching at universities, or they started having families earlier and didn't do college, and that's the exact same genes. So it's environmental to some degree, or to a very large degree. And then second into that is, if you are smart enough to create all that high technology that makes life easier, you're also smart enough, like you and I are, to be able to say, this could be a problem. And you can use technology to solve problems. So if you say, folks, we got a problem.
we got an audit.
Our generations, I was going to be a retard because, just going to be, they're going to be stupid and idiotic, because they're going to have bred themselves down to that, and they're going to, they're genetically still got the brains for it. They just don't actually have to get educated. What do we do about that?
How do we solve that now? Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and that's as you say. I mean, my father always says this about things like global warming and stuff, where he goes like, we always figure out a way. There's not like, that's not to say we shouldn't do something about it, but that we always
assume you're going to solve the problem. Magic. But at the same time, it's like, we can solve this. I can list a number of ways that you can combat climate change that we could do with higher technologies, or even just stuff we got now if we threw ourselves at it. The question is this the most efficient way to do that? And what are the other effects? Because there's always going to be some. And you have to accept they're going to be like, I don't like to use wind power as an example because I'm not actually a huge fan of wind, but say, I want to get energy in a renewable fashion, let's harness the wind. And you do get a lot of dead birds out of doing that. Same problem with solar thermal, right? Those
and bugs. Apparently, bugs are a huge issue too, because they get stuck in the machinery.
Oh yeah, bugs get stuck in everything. This is a warm and energetic place. Let's go live there and make a hive. One time, my wife and I were trying to capture a beehive that our sister-in-law calls it. We got a beehive that's swarming.
We got a swarm. Oh yeah.
Come get them. And we went there and we're trying to figure out. This is a field in the middle of empty air, and around it is trees, nice trees, including rotten ones they like. And what they decided they wanted to live on was a roadside. That was what they were building a hive at. It's like, okay, this is. And when mine don't, because hives are so intelligent. No, bees are dumb. They are exactly that example of highly specialized organism that needs no brains. They want to set up shop in that roadside, and they just stayed there and died as a result of that. They've done that. We ended up trying to get them out there, so we should just use a shop vacuum next time. But we're here on all big white.
Yeah, I've seen the vacuum before. I wondered if that.
Drive by. I went to episode like with they're like, oh hey, people slowing down as they drive by. What was that? Are those FEMA guys? It's kind of like weird nuclear.
Yeah. My grandfather used to do that. I used to go with my grandpa. He used to get calls, and they'd say like, "Oh, we've got a storm," and he'd go and he'd just walk up in his suit and just knock him into it. It was just unbelievable.
They have no. They can just handle like he is. You'll see. There's one video online. You can find it where the guy just takes some, grabs the horse woman on a branch and goes woof.
Yeah.
And they just fall down, and they immediately get Forby again into this thing because they are dumb as doorknobs. That is what they do. They're just going to form right back up into the swarm until the swarms are done being swarmy.
But maybe we are. And maybe for all the things I worry sometimes that for all the things we build and all the things we've created, they're only impressive to us. I mean, they're just...
I have a great answer to that, is that it's not to think about it.
All right. Problem solved. Problem solved.
Like free will. I'm never going to be able to prove I got free will or not. But
yeah. You're right. Worry about the things you can worry about. Do you mind to have two more questions? You got time for two more questions? All right. Nixie. I got both of them from Nixie. If you could instantly get the answer to one science-based question, what would you choose?
One science-based question. What the heck is gravity?
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one.
Probably the big one. Yeah. Is it what the heck is gravity? And maybe tie that into what the heck is.
That would solve a lot of things.
Yeah.
It
would, so I don't know if it was because I don't know if it would solve that many things so much as it would at least finally make that such a less irritating problem. Gravity is one of those ones that's just irritating. You say, well, it's mysterious. That's true. It's mysterious and awesome, but it's so irritating.
Yeah.
And from this is a standpoint, everything with gravity is irritating.
Well, that's a good answer. Very good answer. And then, what is your favorite and least favorite sci-fi movie? Oh, there you go. Wow, I can never do my favorites and worst, but give us a couple of your. Yeah.
So my favorite for a long time was Blade Runner. It still is.
Love it.
And my second for that one was Dune until they did the new Dune movie. I'm the old 1983 David Lynch one. That was my second favorite.
Really?
And then they did the new Dune. I actually do like that better, so I had to change that around. Yeah, it's a great film.
It's so funny. So I didn't. The Dune movie didn't do much for me. Blade Runner was extraordinary. Was like it was.
It's got all the elements in there.
I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times. Like and it holds
The
up.
opening scene, the music, the composition of the Angeles. Oh, yeah,
It holds up beautifully. I didn't mind the sequel. I didn't, but I.
The sequel was good. It wasn't. I mean, it was an impossible thing to live up to. It was a good film,
Yeah.
but it wasn't. It couldn't recapture that.
I loved returning to the world, but the story was the endings are always stupid, but really so Dune. I did like the new Dune. I've got to say I did like the new Dune. I felt that the new Dune captured the books in a better way than although
different ways they did it, that the things they missed in one or did it a little bit differently, and that's kind of it's same like Lord of the Rings was a great film production, but it still had bits that were different from the book.
I couldn't do it. I mean, I watched it, I enjoyed it. But it's almost something different from the books to me. Like it was like a different, talking about books that are different than movies. Jesus, Do Androids Dream of Electric? I mean, oh my God, what a crazy different. I don't think there's anything in that book that I don't know where he got any of it from.
I do not know what certain people do. Short stories get turned into movies a lot. Philip K. Dick is certainly one of those ones, and it is not even. I'd say at least a little bit more like it thematically than like Starship Troopers is as a film to a book. But there's some vast divergence there. One like that too.
Who knows? I mean, and I'm glad because frankly, I liked both of them, but they were extraordinarily different.
Very different.
What about least favorite? Any ones that you're like, oh my God?
Battlefield Earth.
Really?
Earth. Yeah. That was the first movie that I ever because to me going to a film was such a big deal. It cost money. I was a teenager. Getting actually go see one live, I was like that. We used to go watch a film at the end of every semester. We get to go to a group and go. It was like our post finals stress reliever. And
right.
That was the last one for some companies. We'll go graduate and we'll come back. I was heading off to Dayton at the time, and after I was like, "This is a good one. Let's go watch this new sci-fi film with Travolta." And Travolta is a good actor. He's like every other movie by him is either great or. But we went down there and watched that, and then the worst thing is, I went and I had some roommates over the summer there. I was down right past the Air Force Base, and one said, "No, you love the book. The book is so much better." And I said, "Well, that's always been true. If I've seen something, the book is always better. I love reading the book after I've seen the film, never before."
Oh, really? So I like the other way around. No, that's funny. Yeah. I guess you can enjoy the book more after.
You can enjoy the book more because the movie doesn't spoil the book in the same way. And I said, "Well, surely the book will be better," and of course, the book is really part 1 and 2 of a film that only made part 1 of. It was the first time I ever read a book and said it was actually worse than the movie.
Whoa. Isn't that L. Ron Hubbard? Isn't that like it's all part of the Scientology stuff, right?
Oh, well, it's only very loosely related. I don't want to point to is like the basis for it. I think it's got some heavy things it borrows from, but it was one of those ones where aliens have come across the life's breath of the universe in order to gas us with poison to steal our gold.
Yeah.
And it's like, in the grand scheme of the universe, gold is valuable, but there's so many easier places to get it than to grab it and have
like
it.
Every star, isn't it? Like basically.
There's always more in Star Wars. Yeah, Star Wars are full of stuff, and you can siphon it off. Star Wars are convective; they like a stew pot that bubbles.
Yeah.
And
Earth doesn't seem like the place to go.
Yeah, it's got a lot of stuff on it, and like the most valuable thing about a planet like Earth. Even if you hate an intelligent life, I want to wipe out all the competition. That might be you, right? You say, I don't want any competition. All that biology that's there is still insanely valuable, though. Even just like industrial resources. Like maybe all you're going to get out of that biology is a new flavor of yogurt. You're like, we found a new bacterial strain. That might be it. Think about how valuable that is to a galactic empire.
That's true. It's
a lot more valuable than like a few more, like a little bit more rocks.
It does seem a little short-sighted for the so-called intelligent race.
Even from a greedy pharmaceuticals kind of standpoint, planet full of alien life, the last thing was like, we need to colonize this thing now. No, we need to quarantine the heck out of it so we can suck every last piece of scientific knowledge out of that new biology. Then you can do what you want with that.
That's interesting, though. That is an interesting really point, though. That the biology is probably the most valuable part of our planet, in that it's the most rare aspect certainly from a galaxy standpoint. We seem to be.
So people always ask me, what do you think if aliens really come to Earth, what are they doing here? And I'll say, well, I don't think they are, but let's assume it's true. Right? Let's assume it's true. Say, one, they're here to steal all comic books and other museum items. Kid you not. That's one of the ones that comes up easiest is there's small smuggling operations for people who are trying to collect rare cultural artifacts of like pre-galactic empire things before they met aliens. They want to get all that stuff, and they want that rare #1 edition, that's the physical one, not the digital version, because they're going to sell that on the market to some billionaire somewhere.
Oh my
So
God.
they're the ones who
That's
got
so
like
funny. So it's basically,
basically.
it's a bit like it's a bit like the British Empire going in and stealing all the good stuff out of the temples and stuff.
They want to get it while they can, and before anyone knows what it's valued. So you go in there like go to maybe the CIA or something. Say, I'm from the good guy rebel empire. We're here to help and save your planet. I need
Superman #1.
Superman #1. I need the copy of the Van Gogh. It's all good. I need the real one, by the way.
Right.
We can help you replace it. I need you to mark off that it was. I need to get a photograph of you there. That's all.
Oh my God, that's great.
My chip.
Well, it makes sense if it's a financial.
Yeah, and it makes sense why they'd be like ones that were getting detected occasionally because they're using crappy beat up technology like the Millennium Falcon, and they probably have to run some kind of blockade where there's a bunch of people who actually like watch over the planet to make sure one gets there, but they don't care that much because someone's stealing artwork. They're not trying to take the place over. They've only got so much limited budget for quarantining the planet.
I still like the idea of them coming by and stealing cows, though, because organically, it's a type of that's in a way that almost makes more sense than gold.
You get those DNA samples, and the thing is, they've known the planet's been here. It's been here a long time, and we're not seeing it. Wasn't on radio waves. As we learn more about these things, like you could spot a planet that's got an atmosphere pretty easily. But you don't have to send a probe there. Say, I wonder what that planet with an oxygen-rich atmosphere is there. That's been for the last billion years. Should we wait to send a probe until they send radio signals? 2 billion years to go. Let's wait till we send radio signals. Let's not investigate before then.
I always think we're probably being avoided because we look like Pigpen in a Charlie Brown, because we've just got all the trash floating around our planet, and they're like, "Oh man, you don't want that planet. That's like that's like all the rusting cars. It's like all the rusting cars parked outside the outside the trailer.
Blocks, we outside with the grass.
Yeah, that's why they avoid us. Look, I should wrap this up because we're almost at 2 hours, and you've been amazing. When do you have time? How do you have time to do this? You've got how many of the videos are you putting out? You said it's like 7 or something, wasn't it?
We put out 7 new ones a month. There's one for every Thursday, and then I've been doing Thursday episodes since 2016, and I do a couple extra ones, usually on like Sci-fi Sunday episodes or things like that. We just kind of buckle into something more sci-fi, and I write them as I get ideas for them, and even just having conversations like this, I've got ideas for an episode out of it. So it's
great! Good.
So,
fantastic.
It would be the Clark Tech on something on possible technologies. Would be fun to do. So.
Right. And how long does it take you to do it? What's the?
Oh, it varies. I mean, sometimes I can knock a script out that's like 30 minutes and maybe 3 or 4 hours, and then others would be like, I've been working at this thing all week. It's rewrite #7. It's garbage. Let's throw this out and start over again.
Really?
So it's the nature of the process.
Are you bouncing it off other people? I mean, is there any back and forth?
We have a lot of volunteers on the show who will read through scripts in their free time, and so they already know the material pretty well, and they'll find errors or things that just don't make sense occasionally. But we have ones where nobody had time to look at it because of a busy season, and we just go straight from me to them. Or I say, well, I want this episode out in 2 days, so I just run it through, read the draft through, make sure I didn't say anything really stupid, and then if it's bad, you can always take it down. Never had to do that yet. So.
Well, and also I feel like to some extent it's better to have to still be communicating and getting stuff out there, even if it's in a more raw form. I mean,
if it's something that actually is inaccurate, you say something stupid or not amusing, it's not as funny. That's one thing. But if you actually put something out there, it's like Einstein's theory of relativity says X. Like, no, it's Y.
Right.
You got to pull that one down at that point, or at least put up a big correction, which YouTube is really touchy about putting anything up on that. Say, I'm wrong here.
Oh, really?
Correction, yeah.
Yeah. Why don't they have the editor? Don't they? That you can actually.
They do, but that editor is so hard to actually use.
I know it's awful.
Cut stuff out. In the old days, you could actually put up text box windows. When I started off, anyway, is you could just put something on screen that said text. So if you made an error, you could just post up there. No, I'm not.
I meant this, or yeah.
That there.
And you can't do that anymore.
No. I wish they would put that back.
But. And what's their fear there? Is there worried that you're going to slip something in that you shouldn't?
It's YouTube. They don't tell anybody anything. Everybody who works for YouTube as a creator is a mushroom kept in the dark and fed on crap. They are very quiet about what they say on things. That's probably a little bit unfair to them. Now they're going to ratio my channel.
That's okay. You're on my channel now, so it's fine. It'd just be my channel.
YouTube is awesome. I love YouTube, and I do. They've done an amazing thing by creating this environment. But much like Facebook or Reddit, I'm very happy they exist, or Twitter. But at the same time, I find using them at times exhausting and feel like they don't always do a great job considering the resources they can potentially have to make it a little bit more easy for creators to use it well. So,
I mean, talking about the future, do you think it is YouTube? Do you think? I mean, do you think it's, or do you think it's going to be? Is it? Are we going to return to our own websites, or where do you see things going?
I mean, I think you don't ever see a decrease in media types. You just see expansion. Like we still have print media, and that's not going to completely disappear. It's more niche-y, but it's still there. You're not going to get rid of any of the types of media that currently exist. Maybe one will go completely away, but in all probability, it will just, I don't even want to say shrink, because when the population is expanding and demanding more content, the areas that might shrink as a percentage might still actually grow as a total.
Right.
But I don't think YouTube's going anywhere, but I mean, just kind of the streaming platform where you put your own stuff up, that's not going anywhere. I mean, as long as humans are humans, we're all going to want to post up stuff and, here's what I have to say on this and that.
And is it just YouTube? The channel is the focus. That's it. YouTube.
The channel is the focus. I think of it as a show, but we're on Nebula, we're on Rumble, we're on Subscribestar. I don't release on Instagram anymore because I haven't quite figured the system out, but we were releasing on TikTok, little shorts for a while. We also do the audio-only versions like Amazon, iTunes, Spotify.
Wow, that is. Are you administering all of that yourself?
I am, and thankfully it's fairly automated. I should learn to delegate more stuff. A lot of channels my size or bigger, they got staff that actually does this for them, and that probably makes more sense, but it's just, there's always something new to learn, and if you don't know how it's working, you can't tinker with it. So
yeah, it's kind of a control freak thing too, isn't it? I just like I like learning. I like learning the stuff, and one of the things I actually strangely enjoy, I don't know if you do this or not, is the thumbnails. I love making little Photoshop.
No, I love them. Yeah,
it's so much fun.
One of the things I'll ask my wife to come over here and look at this and see if it makes sense.
Yeah.
And she's graphic design before she got in politics, so she actually has good taste for them. She can say, no, it's that doesn't mean anything to me. It's too sci-fi. But I love doing the graphic design.
Isn't it fun? It's and then incorporating the AI stuff in as well. I love just being able to.
My episode ideas. I'll be looking through some artwork trying to find a cover for something. I'll see something else like, that's an episode. And so I have to use that at that point as a cover art because it would be kind of wrong not to use the thing that inspired it. But you see something that says, "Wow, that makes me think about that," and say, "I'm going to do an episode on that right now." And I've had that happen. I just found a piece of artwork and I wrote the episode right that minute.
Wow.
And obviously, it took a few hours, but that is that whole point of inspiration, like that flowing circle between like the art side of science and the sci-fi side and the actual researchy side and then the education side is all that feedback is what makes it grow. And so when you actually have one of those feedback moments, one of those inspiration moments, roll with it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's crap, of course, but
But again, you don't know unless you do it, right? I mean, that's.
You know what you actually put in, and sometimes when you're done with it, you're like, you know what? That seems so much better in my head. And so you scrap it and we do it, or you say, well, okay, good enough. But sometimes you're like, that, bam, that's exactly it.
Well, I have to see a screening tonight, so I will suffer exactly the same thing where I go like, I remember that being so much better acted than I was doing when I see it now.
It came together, yes.
But it's well, look, Isaac, thank you so much. Do you want to just let people know where? I'm sure they know where to find you, but
if you Google Isaac Arthur or go to YouTube and search Isaac Arthur, it's Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur. We have it every Thursday morning, and of course the episode's always out there for people to grab. And again, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh God, a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. I cannot wait to hear what you've been inspired to write next, and I wish you all the best. We'll have to definitely keep in touch because we'll have to get you back as the new developments show up. Thank you very much.
Glad to be back on anytime you want me. So
I will say my usual: be brave, be kind, be brilliant. Thank you all. Until we geek again, I'll say cheerio and huzzah. Who's actually lying right here, by the way. The dog has been very excited about this the entire time. Yeah, the wretched mutt. Thanks again. Thanks so much. I will end our stream and let people go their way. Cheerio. Thanks everyone. And thank you, Isaac, and thank you, Cal, and thank you so much.